Chapter 2469. Destruction of the Red Flame Sect. Fong Jing slowly opened her eyes after she killed Elder Dong. She stared at his corpse calmly and murmured, "There are a total of 3 heavenly Xian immortals in the demonic Orchid Mountains. Now that I've killed one of them, the other 2 will realize it very soon. I can't let them spread this news, or immortal monarchs will come. My soul is too weak right now, so the laws that I can use are limited. I can't fight immortal monarchs for now." Fong Jing stood up and flew outside. Many miners and disciples of the Red Flame Sect poured in and out of the maze-like tunnels as she moved through them. Fong Jing turned into a gust of wind, drifting outwards. No one sensed her traces. She did not touch the ordinary miners, but whenever she passed by a disciple in the uniform of the Red Flame Sect, they would die. In an instant, several dozen disciples of the Red Flame Sect died. Their inexplicable deaths unsettled all the miners in the tunnels. They fell into a commotion. The 2 other elders of the Red Flame Sect emerged from the divine hall atop the mountains as well. They stood at the entrance as they observed the mine below with the senses of their souls. "Oh no, Elder Dong is dead." At this moment, the late God King Elder's face changed and he cried out. The other mid-God King Elder's face became extremely ugly as well. He also cried out, "Several dozen disciples have died for no reason in the mines." The 2 of them looked at each other and could tell how stern the other was. The late God King immediately said, "Contact the sect." "It's already too late." At this moment, a woman's voice rang out of nowhere. A gust of wind had arrived before the 2 elders, and Fong Jing appeared before the 2 elders silently. "Who are you?" The expressions of the elders changed, and they immediately bellowed out. "You have no right to learn my name," Fong Jing said coldly. With that, the power of laws that were terrifyingly shocking to the elders suddenly appeared. As invisible mountains, they crushed down on the 2 of them with destructive power. Bang! With that, the 2 elders directly exploded. They were killed off. However, Fong Jing's complexion changed slightly as well. She became rather pale. This was a result of overexerting her soul. She extended her finger and took away the space rings of the 2 God Kings before turning into a gust of wind again. She roamed through the mountains. Immediately, the disciples that watched over the surroundings collapsed one by one. All of them died, but there was not a single wound on them. Their deaths were rather strange. Before long, all the disciples of the Red Flame Sect were dead in the demonic Orchid Mountains. Only a few miners were left standing there in fright. They had no idea what to do. They wanted to run, but the entire mountain range was surrounded by a formation, cutting them off. They could not escape with their strength. After killing off the disciples, the gust of wind entered the depths of the mine once again. Fong Jing continued to absorb the energy in the divine crystals. She completely ignored the miners who were trapped there. The energy vanished from the mine at a crazy rate. As Fong Jing strengthened, her rate of absorption became faster and faster as well. As Fong Jing cultivated there, all the miners trapped in the mountains stopped excavating the divine crystals. They all gathered in an empty region of the mine. After their initial unease, they gradually calmed down. This was because they had discovered that everyone dead came from the Red Flame Sect. Not a single miner that did not belong to the Red Flame Sect had perished, so they guessed that there was probably a mysterious expert who had grievances with the Red Flame Sect and would not harm innocent people. They completely stopped worrying with that thought. They all just sat down and began to cultivate quietly. Do not take the energy of the divine crystal mine when you cultivate. Only absorb the origin energy in the surroundings. The miners warned one another. The energy pulses from the depths of the mine became more and more powerful. In the end, it could no longer be hidden, allowing them to sense it clearly. This allowed them to understand that the mysterious expert who had massacred all the disciples of the Red Flame Sect had not left. Instead, they remained in the mines, cultivating. However, none of them dared to venture into the depths and check on the situation. A year later, all the energy had been drained from the high-grade divine crystal mine in the demonic Orchid Mountains. The entire mine had run out of energy. Without the support of energy, the formations that enveloped the entire place automatically shut down and became useless. The protective formation has vanished. Hurry up, let's go. At this moment, the miners trapped in the mountains suddenly called out. Afterwards, they all fled outside as quickly as they could. In the blink of an eye, over 10,000 miners were gone. Several hours later, several figures flew over from the distance and hovered above the demonic Orchid Mountains. A total of 4 people had come. They were all god kings, and all of them stared below sternly. The miners have vanished. The formations have shut down. Even the 3 elders stationed here are gone. Something really has happened to the demonic Orchid Mountains. What has happened here? Why can't we sense any energy from the mines at all? The mine has dried up. How is that possible? The faces of the 4 elders changed drastically. They became filled with disbelief. It would definitely be a heavy blow to the Red Flame sect now that their high-grade divine crystal mine was gone. Afterwards, the 4 elders panicked. They flew towards the mines. The Red Flame sect could lose the 3 elders. They could also lose a year's worth of high-grade divine crystals, but they could not afford to lose the entire mine. However, as soon as they approached the mine, 4 strands of powerful sword chi turned into 4 streaks of light, shooting out from a tunnel. They punched through the heads of the 4 elders with lightning speed. The 4 elders all failed to react. They were dead. Fang Jing walked out from the tunnel. Her cultivation had currently reached early God King. With a wave of her hand, Fang Jing stowed away the space rings of the 4 God Kings. She looked in the direction of the Red Flame sect and murmured, "With the strength of my soul now, I can handle immortal monarchs." The Red Flame sect is a place with 3 immortal monarchs after all, so the resources in there should allow me to recover quite a lot of my cultivation. The secrets of Heaven's heart really is profound. Whether it's energy absorption or recovering cultivation, it's several times faster or even over a dozen times faster compared to other methods. As she murmured, Fang Jing directly flew towards the Red Flame sect. A few days later, the protective formations of the Red Flame sect continued to operate as normal, but rivers of blood had appeared in the sect. The Red Flame sect with over 100,000 disciples had been destroyed. Everyone, from those as strong as the 3 great elders or as weak as Origin Realm disciples, had collapsed in pools of blood. Fang Jing sat in the central square of the Red Flame sect. A mountainous pile of space rings stood before her, along with a terrifying amount of heavenly resources and cultivation resources stacked to one side. She was using these cultivation resources to recover her cultivation. Although it is degrading for me to kill you, you are a part of the saints' world. With that being the case, there's no need for me to show mercy. Moreover, I just happen to need these things to recover my cultivation, Fang Jing thought with a clear conscience. Chapter 2470. 10 years later. Time passed in the blink of an eye. Unknowingly, a decade had already passed. A decade was nothing to the saints' world. But the Aqua Plane had not been peaceful during these 10 years. Ever since the Red Flame sect with 3 infinite primes was silently destroyed 10 years ago, many other organizations and sects were destroyed one after another. Without any exception, all of these sects were ancient organizations with infinite primes. No one knew who the culprit was. Even when a few primordial realm experts tried turning back time, they were unable to discover who did all this. During this period of time, all the ancient organizations on the entire Aqua Plane quaked in fear. Basically, all the sects were on high alert. Even a few eternal organizations with chaotic primes secretly became cautious and paid close attention to the entire Aqua Plane, wanting to find the culprit. Fang Jing wore a white dress as she stood in a building within the city of an everlasting empire. She stared into the distance in a daze. Not only did she seem even more mature than 10 years ago, but she had also gained an otherworldly bearing. She was like a fairy that had transcended worldly affairs. However, it was possible to tell from her cold eyes that behind her quiet manner was a lot of depths. Any eye contact with her would be chilling. She had become a late God King now. The further I go, the more difficult it is to recover my cultivation, and the cultivation resources that I need starts to multiply. I wonder when I'll be able to return to my peak condition in this foreign land. But now, many sects on the Aqua Plane have become cautious. I can't stay here for much longer. It looks like it's time for me to leave. A hazy figure shrouded by light sat in the heavenly palace of Bishing on the Prosper Plain. Myriad laws interwove with one another above the figure's head as the truths of the ways were invoked. It bypassed time to depict the past and the future. Clearly, this person was using a technique to peer into certain matters. As he peered, the light around him surged. The sound of the ways boomed like thunder as the order of the world seemed to be impacted. In the region where he resided, the 5 elements were reversed while yin and yang fell into a mess. The laws of the world became chaotic. I've finally found the last fragment of ancient Pad's soul. At this moment, the figure spoke. It was impossible to distinguish his gender. He stopped his technique, and the chaotic space around him gradually settled down. "Exin," he called out. His voice was like the sounds of the ways, passing through the various obstructions and reaching another region in the heavenly palace of Bishing. With that, the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, Exin, appeared silently. Her face was filled with respect as she clasped her fist. "Greetings, Master. May I ask what Master requires of me?" "Go to the heaven-splitting clan on the 9 Clouds Plain and take back the last fragment of ancient Pad's soul from the heaven-splitting ancestor," the Inata Grand Exalt ordered coldly. Senior Ancient Pad's last soul fragment is actually in the hands of the heaven-splitting ancestor. Exin was very surprised by this, but she immediately clasped her fist and replied, "Yes, Master." Jian Chen cultivated on the fortune jade within the cave where martial soul rock could be mined. Silver-white light faded in and out in his surroundings as if they revolved around him. Marital soul force was restricted by the laws of the hallowed. His martial soul force had already grown to the peak of his current level of cultivation. As such, unless he achieved a breakthrough with his comprehension of the laws of the hallowed, his martial soul force would not be able to grow any further. Now, he was using the fortune jade to comprehend the laws of the hallowed. "It has been 10 years, and my laws of the hallowed have only reached early over God. At this speed, it'll take me a century at the very least to reach God King even with the assistance from the fortune jade. Just God King will take a century. Who knows when I'll be able to reach the primordial realm?" Jian Chen opened his eyes, and a sliver of impatience appeared on his face. He had found a method to increase his martial soul force quickly after so much difficulty. However, he was restrained by his laws of the hallowed in the end. They prevented him from advancing any more with martial soul force. This filled him with pity. After all, he did not have a golden core of laws for the laws of the hallowed, so it was impossible for his speed of comprehension to match the laws of strength, laws of fire, laws of space, and so on. As a matter of fact, the time that Jian Chen spent to reach his current level of comprehension was probably unprecedented in the entire Saints world. He was truly a deviant. After all, he had started comprehending the laws of the hallowed from scratch, inching his way up step by step. He was not like those reincarnated experts who would regain their past comprehension after recovering their memories, whose subsequent cultivation would become extremely fast. I wonder what the situation with the Tian Yuan clan is. I can't stay on the Martial Soul Mountain for over 100 years. It looks like I can only come and absorb these martial soul rocks after I increase my comprehension of the laws of the hallowed in the future, thought Jian Chen. After making up his mind, he immediately stood up and left. He arrived before the medium-quality god artifact Divine Hall again. The soul-destroying technique is an offensive secret technique I've grasped. Artifact Spirit, you mocked my martial soul force for only being able to scratch an itch for you before, so let me use this soul-destroying technique to keep scratching your itches, Jian Chen said to the Divine Hall before him. With that, he closed his eyes and used the secret technique. The secret techniques of martial soul force were completely different from god-tier battle skills. Some battle skills could only be cast through hand seals. However, the secret techniques and abilities that involved martial soul force would be completed in the Sea of Consciousness, directly through controlling martial soul force. Jian Chen had chosen a few secret techniques that suited him more to practice from the sacred grounds. However, as he had always been trying to increase his martial soul force and laws of the hallowed during the past few years, he had never found the time to practice these techniques and secret techniques. Now, he finally had the opportunity. Am I supposed to be afraid of you? Your puny martial soul force only has the right to scratch my itches, said the artifact spirit mockingly. Although that was what he said, he did become nervous as well. After all, martial soul force was just too wondrous. It could directly penetrate the obstructions of the divine hall to attack his body. He had no idea just how much Jian Chen's martial soul force had increased by after 10 years. Jian Chen sat there with his eyes closed, doing his best to control martial soul force and condense the soul-destroying technique. As this was the first time he had tried to use this technique, it was not very successful even though he knew the method and tricks. He failed several times in condensing it. Several hours later, Jian Chen finally condensed the soul-destroying technique. He suddenly opened his eyes, and they became pitch black. Powerful martial soul force gathered at his forehead. But in the next moment, the martial soul force gathered near his forehead collapsed. It began to disperse. His first attempt at casting it was a failure. Is that your so-called soul-destroying technique? The artifact spirit, who had always remained on high alert, could not help but laugh aloud after witnessing this. Jian Chen's face did not change. He continued to close his eyes and started to condense the soul-destroying technique again. He used an even shorter amount of time with the condensation this time. In just 2 hours, he completed it. His eyes suddenly snapped open, and they immediately became pitch black. It was like a boundless black mist surged there violently. It was an enchanting sight. A strange pulse appeared from his forehead. Martial soul force shot out like a sharp sword, directly penetrating the divine hall and reaching the body of the artifact spirit. Chapter 2471. Dedicated practice. The divine hall shook gently, and Jian Chen seemed to hear a grunt from the artifact spirit. Jian Chen's lips could not help but curl into a smile. He knew he could already cause some problems to the artifact spirit with the soul-destroying technique he had grasped. Of course, it was only some problems. After all, his current martial soul force was only equivalent to an early overgod. If it were not for the fact that martial soul force could bypass the defenses of the divine hall and directly attack the artifact spirit inside, it probably would not fail to even scratch the divine hall's itch. After all, the greatest advantage of an artifact spirit of a divine hall was that they could use the object itself against enemies. As a medium-quality god artifact, even infinite primes could do nothing to it. However, once the tough shell they relied on was rendered useless, they would become extremely frail. Martial soul force just happened to be the ultimate countermeasure against artifact spirits like that. Artifact spirit, was the scratching comfortable? Jian Chen sat on a rock before the divine hall and said as if he was trying to hold back a smile. It was comfortable. It was comfortable, alright. It was too comfortable. Jian Chen, you brat, keep it coming. Why did you stop? Have you lost the ability to keep casting it? Said the artifact spirit provokingly. I can't use the soul-destroying technique I just grasped at will. I have not reached the point where I only need a thought for it. I just happen to be in need of practice. Since you desire your itches to be scratched by me so much, I'll give you what you want, Jian Chen said indifferently. With that, he closed his eyes and used the soul-destroying technique again. He's actually using it a second time? Using a secret technique like that will definitely take quite a toll on him. Let's see how many times he can use it, murmured the artifact spirit that hid in the divine hall to himself as he became alert. Although the soul-destroying technique earlier was not enough to harm him, the attack was enough to affect him to a certain degree. Once or twice was fine, but if there were a few more times, it would not feel great even if it could not injure him. Afterwards, Jian Chen sat before the divine hall and used the soul-destroying technique time and time again. As he used it more and more, he gradually gained a better grasp over it. The time it took him to cast it each time shrunk from once every 2 hours to once an hour to once every 40 minutes. Whenever Jian Chen's soul-destroying technique struck the artifact spirit, the divine hall would tremble gently. The trembling became stronger and stronger as Jian Chen used the soul-destroying technique more and more. It's comfortable. It really is comfortable. This feeling is fantastic. In the 10 million years I've been alive, I've never experienced something so wonderful. Jian Chen, hurry up. the artifact spirit's voice rang out, but in reality, his face hidden within the divine hall had begun to warp. He had endured several attacks from the soul-destroying technique. Each attack would strike his consciousness with great accuracy. Although he was not injured, it was a horrible feeling. It was a pain just like a headache. A headache could not harm his soul, but it was definitely not a nice feeling. That was the pain that the artifact spirit currently went through. Finally, after casting it over a dozen times, Jianqin stopped. He had basically depleted all of his martial soul force. I've already shortened the time to condense the soul-destroying technique to half an hour. Although I'm still quite far off from being able to use it in an instant, it's quite an improvement. Jianqin stood up and made his way over to the cave where he could harvest martial soul rock. Jianqin, why aren't you continuing? Are you just going to leave like this? I haven't had enough yet. The artifact spirit provoked him from behind. Only when Jianqin completely vanished did the artifact spirit let out a long sigh. He's finally gone. If this continues, he'll drive me mad. Why did it have to be me who came across this bloody martial soul force? With martial soul rock, it was extremely simple for Jianqin to recover martial soul force. He only needed to collect the rocks and absorb the martial soul force inside. Moreover, Jianqin absorbed martial soul force at an extremely rapid rate. On the next day, he had completely returned to his peak condition. He left the cave and arrived before the divine hall to practice with the artifact spirit again. The artifact spirit naturally could not go without saying a few offensive remarks when he saw Jianqin. He provoked and scoffed at him. However, Jianqin turned a deaf ear to it all. He was too lazy to pay attention to it. He began casting the soul-destroying technique as soon as he arrived. Several hours later, Jianqin had used the technique over a dozen times and left due to running out of martial soul force. He returned to the cave to recover martial soul force. On that day, his speed to condense the attack increased once again. He went from 1 every half an hour to twice every half an hour. Afterwards, Jianqin would use the artifact spirit for practice daily. Finally, after half a month of practice, he became much more familiar with the usage of the soul-destroying technique. The time it took him to condense the technique had shrunk to half a minute. Half a minute each time is still too long. I need to be able to condense it in a thought. I need to be able to cast it in an instant. Only then will it be a surprise attack. Jianqin was still dissatisfied. He continued to devote himself to practice. However, the further he progressed, the more difficult it became. After another 3 months, Jianqin was finally able to use the soul-destroying technique at will. He could cast it instantaneously. It was also from that moment onwards that he truly grasped a secret technique that involved martial soul force. This secret technique could make his martial soul force attacks even sharper and even more powerful. Of course, the artifact spirit underwent unspeakable torture during those months. He seemed to go through hellish pain. He who had existed for millions of years learned what it meant by living hell and how days could seem as long as years. His attitude towards Jianqin changed again and again. At the very start, he constantly made scathing remarks, scorning him all day long. However, from the second month onwards, he fell silent. He would often go silent for days on end. During the last month, the artifact spirit seemed to be driven a little mad from the torture. It directly began to curse loudly after the silence from before. I can practice a second secret technique now. It's called the heaven-severing technique. The heaven-severing technique is extremely powerful. It's specially designed for opponents more powerful than me. However, the heaven-severing technique leads to intense overexertion, so it's a trump card. It will drain half of all my martial soul force each time I use it. The more powerful my martial soul force becomes, the more powerful the heaven-severing technique will become. With first senior Hunzong, second senior Chu Jian, and third senior Yu Chao's martial soul force as ninth heavenly layer chaotic primes, they can probably kill weaker grand primes in a split second once they use the heaven-severing technique. Although the heaven-severing technique is even more difficult to practice than the soul-destroying technique, I need to grasp it as soon as possible. That way, once my martial soul force reaches a sufficient level, I'll have another trump card, a trump card that's only second to the profound sword chi. Chapter 2472. Astonishing news. Jianchen began practicing the heaven-severing technique. The heaven-severing technique was truly much more difficult to practice than the soul-destroying technique. Not only was it more profound and required an even stricter grasp and control over martial soul force, but the other most important factor was that it heavily depleted martial soul force. With Jianchen's current martial soul force, he could cast over a dozen soul-destroying techniques in a single sitting. As he practiced diligently, he grasped the soul-destroying technique extremely quickly. However, no matter how plentiful his martial soul force was, he would consume half of it each time he cast the heaven-severing technique. He would use up all of his martial soul force after just 2 times, and then he would need to replenish it. Condensing the heaven-severing technique is far harder than the soul-destroying technique. It has already been half a month. I've tried condensing it countless times, but I haven't succeeded a single time yet. Moreover, all of the martial soul force is consumed during the condensation process. Half a month later, Jianchen emerged from the cave where martial soul rock could be collected. He sat down on the rocks before the divine hall again and sank into his thoughts. He thought through the process and all the minor details he went through each time he condensed the heaven-severing technique during that half a month. He did his best to find the reasons for his failure. During this time, the arrogant artifact spirit became quiet for once. It no longer bickered with Jianchen. God damn it, this is utterly despicable. Jianchen has begun practicing a new secret technique for martial soul force. It definitely seems like he'll continue to experiment on me. What do I do? What do I do? Should I keep provoking him, where I disturb his thoughts with words so that he can't comprehend the secret technique in peace? But if I anger him, will he keep using the soul-destroying technique against me? In reality, the artifact spirit had always been paying attention to Jianchen. He felt extremely uneasy. He really did not want to go through the hellish days created from the torture of the soul-destroying technique again. He wanted to mess with Jianchen and disturb his cultivation, but he was also indecisive. He had no idea what to do during that time. Jianchen sat there for 3 days. He finally cast the heaven-severing technique again after that time. Martial soul force rapidly rampaged through his soul, slowly condensing towards a point. This entire process lasted for an entire day. Only then did a tiny, black sword that only Jianchen could sense condense in his soul. This tiny, black sword was completely condensed from half of Jianchen's martial soul force through a special secret technique. It was extremely condensed martial soul force. I've finally condensed it. Jianchen immediately rejoiced when he saw the small, black sword. Afterwards, with a thought, the tiny sword in his soul immediately shot out of his forehead as an invisible pulse, disappearing into the divine hall in an instant. The divine hall shook violently, like a person convulsing. The artifact spirit that hid in there finally let out a miserable cry. Jianchen could not help but smile when he heard the artifact spirit's cry. It seemed like the heaven-severing technique had made the artifact spirit suffer quite a lot. Artifact spirit, how do you feel now? Jianchen asked while holding back a smile. Jianchen, you sly bastard. What skill do you have in always launching sneak attacks at me? If you're really skilled, then remove the restraints on me from the martial soul mountain. Let me fight against you fairly, the artifact spirit said furiously. Fight fairly? Does fairness even exist in this world? If it were truly fair, the elder of mountains and seas from your Gloomwater sect would not have chased us everywhere with his cultivation as a grand prime. Jianchen's tone became rather cold. The artifact spirit was left tongue-tied. At that moment, he felt like he could not retort. After all, he was an artifact spirit, not a sly old fox who had an eloquent tongue. After a moment of silence, he said, Jianchen, why don't we strike a deal? I'll give you a droplet of hell water if you stop attacking me with martial soul force. Jianchen stared at the divine hall calmly and said steadily, it looks like you do fear the heaven-severing technique a little. Although it's very difficult to harm you, it can bring you extreme pain. But I have made it clear. Unless you accept me as your master, you'll be staying here obediently as my practice target for martial soul force secret techniques. Don't you even think about making me yield to you, the artifact spirit declined straightforwardly without any hesitation at all. He left no room for negotiation. The miserable cries of the artifact spirit would constantly ring out on the martial soul mountain during the next period of time. The heaven-severing technique was far, far more powerful than the soul-destroying technique. It caused the artifact spirit great pain. As a result, the artifact spirit was tortured miserably by Jianchen. He would wail out constantly, only a step away from crying out for his maker. However, he sure was stubborn. He would rather endure this great pain than yield to Jianchen. Jianchen's practice of the heaven-severing technique lasted for 5 years. With that, he finally reached a level where he could use the technique at will. 8th Junior, you've mastered the heaven-severing technique so quickly? On this day, Qing Shan come looking for Jianchen. When he saw how Jianchen used the heaven-severing technique smoothly and at will, he was immediately amazed. He arrived before Jianchen and could not help but properly study him. He admired Jianchen from the bottom of his heart and said, 8th Junior, no wonder your strength has been growing so fast. I heard you personally killed a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime last time. That shocked me for such a long time. Now that I look at it, you really are a rare genius. Those supreme prodigies raised by peak organizations only seem to be enough to be subservient to you now that I compare you to them. You are too kind, Senior Qing Shan. I was only lucky. Jianchen stood up and clasped his hands towards Qing Shan. There's no need to be modest. I deeply understand just how difficult it is to practice the heaven-severing technique. It's not something one can master out of luck. Qing Shan continued, oh right. 8th Junior, the heaven-splitting ancestor from the 9 Clouds plane seemed to be slightly interested in you. He even sent a person to forcefully take you away back on the desolate plain. Jianchen nodded. That's indeed the case. Senior Qing Shan, has something bad happened recently since you've suddenly brought this up? No. There's no bad news. Instead, there is good news. Qing Shan chuckled as he seemed extremely happy. He took pleasure in others' suffering. 8th Junior, you spent your entire time practicing the secret technique and paid no attention to the outside world, so you probably don't know about the huge matter that has shaken up the entire Saints world. What's so severe that it can shake up the entire Saints world? Jianchen was curious. For some reason, the heaven-splitting ancestor from the 9 Clouds plane offended the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. He's actually being chased around everywhere by the First Majesty. Chapter 2473, The Martial Soul Lineage in Danger? What? The heaven-splitting ancestor is being hunted down by the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing? This news shocked Jianchen. The heaven-splitting ancestor was a peak expert who stood at the apex of the Saints' world, someone only second to Grand Exalts. His strength was unimaginable. Someone like that basically stood supreme in the Saints' world. Unless there were inconciliable grievances, even peak experts at the same level would not be willing to offend him. All 9th heavenly layer Grand Primes possessed cultivation close to perfection and exceptional abilities. There would be quite a lot of problems once they had been offended. Yet now, Jianchen actually heard that the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, Yexen, was hunting down the heaven-splitting ancestor. While he was stunned, he also felt utterly astonished. He was confused by why the heaven-splitting ancestor had fallen out with the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, and he was also shocked by the First Majesty's strength. He had never thought that while they were both 9th heavenly layer Grand Primes, the heaven-splitting ancestor would actually be hunted down by the First Majesty. This allowed Jianchen to sense just how terrifying the First Majesty's strength was once again. A battle at such a level rarely ever happens in the Saints' world. Now, basically all the peak experts across the Saints' world are paying attention to this, Qing Shan discussed with great interest. He was in high spirits, clearly extremely excited by the whole matter. It felt like the heaven-splitting ancestor was not being hunted down by the First Majesty but Qing Shan himself. Senior Qing Shan, do you know why they began fighting? Jianchen asked. An ancient piece of jade appeared in his hand silently. It was covered with the patterning of the ways. The First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, Tiexen, had handed the jade to him when he returned the Eneta Tower. As long as he had the jade, he did not have to worry about the Elder of Mountains and Seas finding him through his innate ability. Unfortunately, he did not know that the Elder of Mountains and Seas was already dead back then, so the jade was not actually very useful anymore. Qing Shan shook his head. I don't know why they started fighting, but this time, I heard that the heaven-splitting ancestor has been utterly disgraced. He has been chased for several years, and he's still running right now. At this moment, Hunzong walked over from afar. He said to Jianqin, 8th Junior, I heard that you once assisted the current master of the Neptunian Divine Palace when you were in there. Did that actually happen? Yes, I did. However, I had only struck a deal with Xiaoman back then. May I ask why you've suddenly brought up this matter? Hunzong said in thought, the Neptunian Divine Palace had been on the Nine Clouds Plain the entire time before. Previously, it was under the protection of the heaven-splitting ancestor, so no one in the Saints' world dared to eye it. However, ever since the First Majesty killed her way through the Nine Clouds Plain, the heaven-splitting clan's protective barrier has remained shattered. The heaven-splitting ancestor has fled from his clan as well, running all over the Saints' world. Now that the heaven-splitting clan has lost its leader, it has lost its force of deterrence. So many peak experts have secretly infiltrated the Nine Clouds Plain to take the Neptunian Divine Palace away forcefully. The Neptunian Divine Palace fled from the Nine Clouds Plain as a result. So many experts are chasing it down right now. Jianqin became rather stern. Wealth could lead to all sorts of troubles. Now that Xiaoman and Ziyun possessed an extremely valuable high-quality god artifact, the Neptunian Divine Palace, while they were not powerful enough, they would obviously face a lot of problems. After all, he too had been hunted down by all those Grand Primes when he possessed the Eneta Tower. After all, Ziyun and Xiaoman were not like him. There was nowhere that they could hide because the Grand Primes could just peer into their location. The Neptunian Divine Palace could only protect them temporarily. It looks like the two of them are in danger, thought Jianqin. Although his ties with Ziyun and Xiaoman were not particularly deep, he was still rather reluctant to see them being harmed. Jianqin, do you have confidence in roping in the new master of the Neptunian Divine Palace? Hunzong stared at Jianqin with shining eyes. Jianqin was slightly surprised when he heard that. The martial soul lineage had existed for a very long time such that they themselves became an organization. Did they still need to rope in the Neptunian Divine Palace? Hunzong sighed gently as some worry appeared on his face. A few protector swords suddenly appeared in the Radiant Saint Hall. Every single protector sword is astonishingly powerful, so with a few of them, the strength of the Radiant Saint Hall has risen. They've become the greatest organization on the desolate plain. Our martial soul lineage has lost the power to fend off the Radiant Saint Hall, so we need to recruit people who stand with us. Protector swords? Jianqin was in doubt. He had stayed in the Radiant Saint Hall for some time. Although he did not know everything the Radiant Saint Hall hid, he did know most of it. Since when did the Radiant Saint Hall have protector swords? I can try, but I can't guarantee anything, said Jianqin. Hunzong nodded. If the new master of the Neptunian Divine Palace can band with us, we'll be able to keep her safe before she completely matures at the very least. At the same time, we won't desire anything she possesses. However, if she ends up with those other peak organizations, her situation won't be fantastic. A high-quality god artifact might not be able to tempt a supreme expert like the heaven-splitting ancestor, but it is extremely tempting to most Grand Primes in the Saints' world. As a result, we're helping her, not harming her. Let's go and meet the new master of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Hunzong took Jianqin and Qin Shan to the top of the Martial Soul Mountain. Before long, Chu Jian, Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, and Bai Ruffing all gathered over as well. The 8 successors of the Martial Soul lineage had gathered together. 8th Junior, may I ask how much confidence you have in roping in the new master and making her stand on our side? His 5th senior sister, Su Qi, stared at Jianqin. Clearly, she cared about this matter very much. After a moment of thought, Jianqin said, Actually, I don't have much confidence at all. I can only try my best. Su Qi nodded. She was filled with helplessness as she sighed gently. Originally, our martial soul lineage was no weaker than the Radiant Saint Hall. However, after the Radiant Saint Hall gained their protector swords, the difference in strength widened in an instant, forcing us to seek foreign reinforcement. 8th Junior, we'll all be relying on you this time. Roping in the Neptunian Divine Palace is only the first step. We need to gather even more people who will stand with us in the future, or our martial soul lineage will be in danger, Chu Jian added sternly. The appearance of the protector swords made them feel a great sense of danger. Han Zhang glanced past everyone and said, "We'll talk about this in the future. Let's use the power of the mountain soul to head over first. The Neptunian Divine Palace seems to be trapped, so we better hurry up." Chapter 2474. Crossing through space atop the martial soul mountain were 9 grindstone-sized stone pedestals. They stood in a formation there. Every single pedestal was connected with many inscriptions. As he looked at the 9 pedestals, Jianchen knew that this was where the secret for crossing a huge distance and appearing anywhere in the saint's world through the power of the mountain soul lay. The mountain soul was not the soul of the martial soul mountain, but an apparition of the martial soul mountain's power. However, this power was referred to as the mountain soul by the martial soul lineage. That was where its name came from. The formation created by the 9 pedestals was crucial for connecting the power of the martial soul mountain to the outside world. During the years he spent in the sacred grounds, Jianchen had absorbed a lot of knowledge regarding the martial soul lineage. Although he did not know everything, he did know most of it. He knew that there needed to be 5 people at least in order to activate the formation. These 5 people all had to be members of the martial soul lineage. They could not be replaced by others. Moreover, the higher the number of people who took part in activating the formation and the more powerful they were, the more terrifying the mountain soul's power would become. At this moment, Han Zhang, Chu Jian, Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, Bai Ruffing, and Qing Shan all sat on the stone pedestals. Jianchen did not hesitate when he saw that. He arrived before an empty pedestal and sat down. He looked at the empty 9th pedestal and thought, "I wonder when the 9th successor of the martial soul lineage will appear." He could not help but think of the glorious age when all 9 successors were present. However, Jianchen's mind quivered in the next moment. He felt like his soul had established an extremely obscure connection with the martial soul mountain. He felt like he had become part of the martial soul mountain, and they were inseparable. Afterwards, he felt the world around him spin. He seemed to see countless stars flicker as they changed in position. This feeling lasted for just a few seconds. When the landscape around Jianchen cleared up again, he discovered that he was in a completely different region of space. Many meteorites and shattered planets hovered in the surroundings. Violent energy filled the entire region. Jianchen glanced beneath his feet and discovered that the martial soul mountain under him had already turned illusionary. It was completely condensed from energy. In that short moment, he had left the martial soul mountain, crossing a tremendous distance and appearing in a foreign region of space. The martial soul mountain really is wondrous. Just the speed alone is faster than interplanar teleportation formations. More importantly, it doesn't need 5-colored divine crystals at all. Jianchen sighed in amazement inside. At this moment, a huge boom rang out from behind. Jianchen immediately followed the sound and looked over. He saw an azure divine hall there, shining with dazzling, blue light that formed an impenetrable screen of light, enveloping the entire structure. A huge chain shone with dazzling light and wounded around the screen of light, completely trapping the divine hall. Several dozen primordial realm experts surged with energy, using various methods to keep the divine hall suppressed. 7 of them were grand primes, while the rest were chaotic primes. Jianchen's face immediately sank when he saw the trapped divine hall because it was the Neptunian divine palace. The people of the martial soul lineage have actually come as well. I never thought the martial soul lineage would be interested in the Neptunian divine palace as well. However, Hanzong, let me say this first. Before the Neptunian divine palace runs out of energy, we're not allowed to fight against one another, just in case the Neptunian divine palace manages to slip away again. It was impossible for them to hide the arrival of the mountain soul from the peak experts. Even from afar, they noticed it the moment it appeared. Immediately, an old voice boomed out. He was a Grand Prime. His voice was thunderous, booming through the entire region. And what happens once the Neptunian Divine Palace runs out of power? Han Zong asked from the top of the mountain soul. Once it runs out, it'll obviously be up to your personal ability, replied a peak expert coldly. Personal ability? All right then. Han Zong chucked and approached the Neptunian Divine Palace with the martial soul mountain. I'll contact the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace and see if we can forge an alliance through 8th Junior's relationship. If they're willing, we'll do it, Han Zong said to the other members of the martial soul lineage secretly before sitting down. Jian Qin immediately sensed an extremely obscure strand of martial soul force drift out from Han Zhang's forehead, spreading towards the Neptunian Divine Palace carefully. It was difficult for others to discover martial soul force. Coupled with Han Zhang's careful control, even the Grand Primes present failed to sense it. Martial soul force could penetrate everything, so the martial soul force from Han Zhang passed through the energy restraints smoothly. It gently came into contact with the Neptunian Divine Palace without alerting anyone. The Grand Primes in the surroundings stared at the martial soul mountain the entire time. They paid close attention to all their actions. They were extremely stern. A few of them even looked at the martial soul mountain cautiously with fear. The martial soul lineage was renowned across the Saints' world. Although they could not break through to Grand Prime, no one dared to underestimate the successors of the martial soul lineage. This was because many experts who had once fought against them still felt lingering fear. Even after they became Grand Primes, they did not dare to look down on the martial soul lineage as long as they had not reached the higher levels of Grand Prime. Han Zong, why hasn't your martial soul lineage taken action yet? At this moment, a voice rang out. An old man was questioning the martial soul lineage. He felt that something was off from how Han Zong sat with his eyes closed. We've just crossed over a huge distance to come here, so we obviously need to recover. Moreover, wasting away all of the energy can't be achieved in a single day or two. What's the hurry? Han Zong replied calmly. At the same time, Xiao Man and Zi Yun stood within the Neptunian Divine Palace. They were worried and panicking. Clearly, they knew the situation outside very well and understood the predicament they were in. What do we do? What do we do? What are we supposed to do? If this continues, the Neptunian Divine Palace will run out of energy one day. Xiao Man was completely flustered. She was at a complete loss. Xiao Man, don't worry. The heaven-splitting ancestor will definitely come save us. His battle against the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng should end soon. Zi Yun comforted Xiao Man, but her beautiful face was filled with much unease as well. At this moment, a short old man appeared silently. He said to Xiao Man, "Little master, Han Zong of the martial soul lineage has contacted me. He said he wants to form an alliance with Little Master. If Little Master is willing, their martial soul lineage can break us out. I won't listen to them, I won't. I'll never form an alliance with them. They seem all nice, but they're actually tricking us." Do you think I'm easy to trick? Xiao Man shook her head in annoyance. The martial soul lineage has always possessed a good name in the Saints' world. They never delve into tricks and schemes, so they should be trustworthy. Moreover, Han Zong said he's Jian Chen's senior brother. Jian Chen is outside as well, said the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Chapter 2475. Objective fulfilled. When she heard him mention Jian Chen's name, the expression of the previously irritated Xiao Man immediately changed. She stared at the short old man with shining eyes and cried out, "What did you say? Jian Chen is outside? Brother Jian Chen?" Even Zi Yun's eyes lit up when she heard Jian Chen's name. She suddenly looked at the short old man, and a strange light flickered through her eyes. There was undisguised eagerness and excitement. Jian Chen? Is it really him? It has been so many years since I last saw him. I wonder how he's doing now. Zi Yun though inside. She could not help but think of the times she had interacted with him. The old man nodded. Yes, that Jian Chen. However, he seems to have become one of the successors of the martial soul lineage now. I want to see Brother Jian Chen. Let Brother Jianchen in. I want to talk to Brother Jianchen, Xiaoman said excitedly. Back in the Heaven-Splitting clan, she had offered the pernight ore to the Heaven-Splitting ancestor in exchange for him saving Jianchen. In the end, Jianchen vanished from the desolate plain completely, which made Xiaoman feel regret for a very long time. Now that she finally received news of Jianchen again after so many years, she was extremely excited. Although she had not known Jianchen for a very long time, he had assisted her when they met for the first time on the spatial battleship, which filled her with gratitude. Afterwards, when she and Ziyun faced the pursuit of so many god kings and were almost doomed, Jianchen had assisted them in the end, allowing them to survive. Even when she became the master of the Neptunian Divine Palace, Jianchen had assisted her a lot. Not only did Xiaoman develop trust for Jianchen after all this, but she even felt like she could depend on him. She began to treat him as her elder brother. That might not be possible. The Neptunian Divine Palace has been restrained by many experts. Even if Jianchen enters this place, he won't be able to leave. The artifact spirit was troubled. What do we do then? Xiaoman frowned. She was at a loss. Ziyun hesitated before telling her, Xiaoman, we're out of options now. Once the Neptunian Divine Palace runs out of power, we'll end up in their hands anyway. When that happens, who knows what will happen to us? Since that's the case, why don't we just form an alliance with the martial soul lineage? Jianchen is a member of the martial soul lineage after all. I think that if we form an alliance with them, no matter how bad it is, we'll be better off compared to ending up in the hands of the experts who have chased us relentlessly. Clearly, Xiaoman valued Ziyun's words very much. With that, Xiaoman immediately nodded. All right then. Since Brother Jianchen is a part of the martial soul lineage, let's form an alliance with them. I believe Brother Jianchen won't harm us. Hunzong, why hasn't your martial soul lineage taken action yet? Are you saving your energy to take advantage of the situation once we're all exhausted? Another expert called out from outside the Neptunian Divine Palace. When he saw how Hunzong remained seated on the martial soul mountain, he felt that something seemed off. Martial soul force is extremely profound. Those who are not a part of the martial soul lineage will never understand its secrets. Hunzong, are you secretly tampering with the Neptunian Divine Palace through the wondrous abilities of your martial soul force? A man in gold and violet armor asked. His battle intent surged as the power of slaughter wrapped around him. He was the ruler of a large clan in the Saints' world. He was extremely powerful. At the same time, he was the only person present who did not take the martial soul lineage seriously. Hunzong slowly opened his eyes. He looked at everyone and smiled mysteriously. Whatever. Since everyone wants our martial soul lineage to take action, we'll do it then. Martial soul array. Hunzong called out. With that, a light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. He knew that Xiaoman had agreed to the alliance from Hunzang's action. Immediately, without any hesitation, he formed the martial soul array with everyone else. The martial soul array was a famed array used by the martial soul lineage in battle. It was not complicated. Jianchen had already grasped it in the sacred grounds. As soon as the martial soul array was cast, Jianchen immediately felt his vital energies seemingly fuse with everyone else, and all of it surged towards Hunzong. At that moment, all the power from the 8 of them gathered on Hunzong. Moreover, with the formation of the martial soul array, even the illusionary mountain soul below them seemed to fuse with Hunzong, allowing Hunzong to use its power as he wished. Immediately, Hunzang's presence surged. Energy pulsed from him like tidal waves, and the terrifying waves caused space to ripple. There's something off. Be careful, everyone. The expression of the expert in violet and gold changed, and he immediately warned everyone. Anyone could tell with a single glance that Hunzong was using his full strength. There was no need to do something like that just to deplete the Neptunian Divine Palace's energy. Hunzong, what are you trying to do? At the same time, the other Grand Primes bellowed out. They were cautious. Oh no, he wants to destroy our restraint around the Neptunian Divine Palace. Stop him. The armored expert saw through Hunzang's intention very quickly and immediately warned everyone. However, it was already too late. Zong had arrived before the Neptunian Divine Palace and used the soul-destroying technique 5 times. The 5 soul-destroying techniques turned into invisible, sharp swords, directly stabbing into the restraints around the Neptunian Divine Palace. The chain was a medium-quality god artifact. It had been extremely useful in keeping the Neptunian Divine Palace trapped. Arg! Immediately, a painful howl rang out from the chains. The soul-destroying technique used by Zong was far more powerful than Jian Chen's. Now that he had used it 5 times, the artifact spirit of the medium-quality god artifact immediately suffered heavy injuries. It made the chains dim. Zong had unleashed his full strength when he sent out the soul-destroying techniques. The power from the 8 successors of the martial soul lineage gathered on him, along with the power from the mountain soul, so his current strength was far greater than before. He directly hurled out a fist. Its power was shocking and terrifying, collapsing space. He created a hole in the seal that the Grand Primes had laid down around the Neptunian Divine Palace. He directly grabbed a part of the chain with his left hand and wrenched it. With a series of clinks, the entire chain was ripped from the Neptunian Divine Palace. The Neptunian Divine Palace was immediately freed. Zong, the person in violet and gold armor, bellowed out. He directly stabbed the spear in his hand towards Zong. Immediately, the spear shone with blinding light. Terrifying energy gathered over, and it shot through the air with the power from the ways of the world, directly appearing before Zong. Zhang's eyes suddenly became pitch black. He stared right at the spear as invisible martial soul force erupted. Immediately, the spear trembled and dimmed. It slowed down as well, allowing Zong to dodge it easily. Zong, your martial soul lineage has actually ruined everything. At the same time, the other peak experts were extremely furious. They all condensed the power of ways and launched multicolored attacks towards Zong, piercing through space. They knew the powers of Zhang's marital soul force, so they did not dare to use god artifacts. They were afraid that the artifact spirit would be injured and the god artifact's power would plummet. At this moment, the Neptunian Divine Palace turned into a blur and charged out as quickly as it could. It landed on the mountain soul and hovered before Jianqin. Currently, it was the size of a fist. Kid, the little master trusts you a lot. Don't let little master down. I'll let you hold on to me for now. We'll discuss the other matters once we leave here. The artifact spirit's voice rang out in Jianqin's head. With a flash, Zong appeared on the martial soul mountain as well. He looked at the Neptunian Divine Palace hovering before Jianqin and smiled faintly. We've fulfilled our objective. There's no need to waste our efforts in a pointless battle against them. Let's go back. Zong, your martial soul lineage has gone too far. The armored expert hovered beyond the martial soul mountain. He worked with the other peak experts, launching fierce attacks at the martial soul mountain. Chapter 2476, I only recognize Jianqin, let's go. Zong called out, and the martial soul mountain there suddenly vanished. It completely disappeared along with the 8 successors of the martial soul lineage and the Neptunian Divine Palace. The attacks from the Grand Primes landed where the martial soul mountain vanished. Devastating shockwaves collapsed space, reducing that region into darkness. There were so many of them, but they were unable to stop the martial soul mountain from leaving. I really never thought that we would go to such lengths only to be taken advantage of by the martial soul lineage in the end, a Grand Prime old man sighed at the sky. His face was filled with helplessness and regret. The other experts also hovered in outer space and stared at where the martial soul mountain had vanished from. Although they were vexed, they also felt powerless. The eyes of the expert in gold and violet armor were cold. His face was extremely ugly. He snorted coldly before leaving in a flash. All the peak experts who took part in the operation for the Neptunian Divine Palace ended up wasting their efforts. They allowed the martial soul lineage to take away the Neptunian Divine Palace easily. The colossal martial soul mountain hovered quietly in a distant region of outer space. It moved through space with an irregular motion. Jianqin, Zong, and the others suddenly appeared on the martial soul mountain. They had crossed a huge distance with the Neptunian Divine Palace, returning to the martial Soul Mountain. However, everyone was staring at the fist-sized Neptunian Divine Palace in Jian Chen's hand. They all smiled. "I never thought that forging an alliance with the Neptunian Divine Palace would be so easy," said Jian Chen's fifth senior sister, Su Qi. Clearly, she was extremely happy. Han Zong chuckled from that. Eighth Junior was crucial to this entire process happening without a hitch. If it were not for Eighth Junior's connection, the master of the Neptunian Divine Palace would have never been willing to work with us. Our martial soul lineage really has gained quite a lot of good fortune with Eighth Junior's arrival. The peak organizations have tried everything they can think of to rope in the Neptunian Divine Palace, but we, the martial soul lineage, succeeded in our first attack. It's all because of Eighth Junior, added Yu Chao in praise. Clearly, the members of the martial soul lineage were extremely delighted over the fact that they had successfully forged an alliance with the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although the master of the Neptunian Divine Palace was still very weak, the Divine Hall was a high-quality god artifact after all. It would bring great help to the martial soul lineage. If the martial soul lineage waged battles elsewhere, the Neptunian Divine Palace would basically be a sturdy, moving fortress. After all, the true martial soul mountain could not be controlled. Moving through space with the power of the mountain soul could only take them to regions in outer space. They were unable to descend on the 49 Great Plains or the 81 Great Planets. Moreover, the mountain soul was not invincible. Once they encountered an extremely powerful opponent, its power could still be dispersed. In terms of defense, the mountain soul completely paled in comparison to a high-quality god artifact. The addition of the Neptunian Divine Palace had made up for the martial soul lineage's only flaw in battle. Bang! With a heavy thud, the Neptunian Divine Palace turned back to thousands of meters long and landed on an open area of the martial soul mountain. If it were not for how extraordinary the martial soul mountain was, this would probably be enough to crush the mountain to pieces. Jian Chen looked at the Neptunian Divine Palace and smiled faintly. He knew that this had all been on purpose because even if the Divine Hall was terrifyingly massive, the artifact spirit could still make it as light as a feather and prevent all this. The martial soul mountain really is extraordinary. I feel like it's even more mysterious than the rumors say. When I tested it just then, I could not shake it up at all with my current power. Moreover, I can sense a very great suppressive power hidden in here. Once the suppressive power erupts, even I probably can't leave. Little master, stay in here. Don't go out, said the short old man in the Neptunian Divine Palace sternly. He was fearful towards the martial soul mountain. I believe that brother Jian Chen won't harm me. If he really does harm me, then I'll just accept all of it. Xiao Man seemed like she was ready to risk everything. She completely ignored the artifact spirit's words and immediately flew out. Ziyun followed Xiao Man closely. As she looked at the entrance that grew closer and closer, she discovered that her heart had started to beat faster and faster. Jian Chen's tall, sturdy figure would constantly appear in her mind. Finally, the two of them emerged from the Neptunian Divine Palace. They stood at the Neptunian Divine Palace's grand entrance. From there, they saw Jian Chen standing with the 7 other successors of the martial soul lineage with a single glance. Brother Jian Chen, I've finally found you. Xiao Man called out happily. Just like an orphan who had found her long-lost parents, she seemed extremely excited. She immediately ran over and clung onto Jian Chen's arm closely. Ziyun stood at the entrance as she smiled. Her gaze remained fixed on Jian Chen the entire time. She seemed rather composed on the surface, but she was nowhere close to calm inside. Xiao Man, you've grown up. Jian Chen smiled. Xiao Man now seemed like a lady in her 20s, no longer the little girl he had met back then. Even Xiao Man's strength had increased drastically since then. She had reached late reciprocity, only a step away from godhood. Afterwards, Jian Chen looked at Ziyun. He smiled and nodded at her in greeting. Several decades have passed, but apart from growing stronger, he hasn't changed at all, thought Ziyun. For some reason, she suddenly felt extremely calm the moment she saw Jian Chen. It was as if the sense of danger she experienced in the past few years when she fled with Xiao Man in the Neptunian Divine Palace had evaporated in an instant. It was like she had managed to find a calm, little island in the surging, tempestuous seas, finding a place that could shelter her from everything. With a slight greeting, they formally began the discussion of the alliance. "We can form an alliance, but I'll only discuss with Brother Jianchen. I won't talk to anyone else other than Brother Jianchen," Xiao Man said firmly. Han Zong and the others looked at one another. In the end, they smiled bitterly and helplessly. Without any other choice, they could only allow Jianchen and Xiao Man to discuss the exact details of the alliance separately. Chapter 2477, Ziyun's heart. Jianchen, Xiao Man, and Ziyun sat around a stone table in a beautiful garden within the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although Jianchen had come as a representative of the martial soul lineage to discuss the details of the alliance with Xiao Man, it took the three of them quite a long time to reach that topic. Instead, they began a casual conversation. After seeing Jianchen, it seemed like she had suddenly found the person she depended on. She explained all the suffering, worries, and fear she had experienced outside, mentioning all the difficulties she went through. When she mentioned how she had been surrounded by all the experts, she even had to hold back sobs. She seemed pitiful. All of the pernight ore in the Neptunian Divine Palace ended up in the heaven-splitting ancestors' hands? Jianchen naturally learnt about the deal between Xiao Man and the heaven-splitting ancestor, which made his face change slightly. Although pernight ore was only a high-grade god-tier material, he had learnt from the samsaric immortal Exalt that it was far more complicated than it appeared on the surface. That was because pernight ore was a crucial material for the creation of an ultimate weapon. Once the ultimate weapon was refined, the immortal's world and the demon's world would be facing disaster. I was weak back in the Neptunian Divine Palace, and I couldn't even approach the pernight Oregon. As such, I was unable to take it away. Originally, I planned on getting stronger before exchanging it with Xiao Man for other things. I never thought the pernight ore would end up in the hands of the heaven-splitting ancestor instead, thought Jianchen. The future was truly unpredictable. When he left the pernight ore where it was before, he never thought he would lose all hope of taking it away. He understood that since the pernight ore had ended up in the hands of the heaven-splitting ancestor, there was no chance of him taking it back unless he became so powerful that he did not fear the heaven-splitting ancestor anymore. However, the heaven-splitting ancestor was a 9th heavenly layer Grand Prime, one of the most powerful existences below Grand Exalt. He stood at the apex of the world. Jianchen could not deal with even the weakest chaotic primes with his current level of cultivation, so the difference between him and the heaven-splitting ancestor could not be described as just an uncrossable chasm. But what's the heaven-splitting ancestor going to do with all that pernight ore? However, Jianchen also felt very curious. High-grade god-tier materials were very precious, but they did not seem to interest experts like the heaven-splitting ancestor. "Brother Jianchen, where did you go when you left the desolate plain? Brother Jianchen, when did you join the martial soul lineage?" Afterwards, Xiao Man seemed to become a curious child, asking various questions about what Jianchen had gone through in the past few years. Ziyun could not add in even a single word. In the blink of an eye, a day and a night had passed. When Jianchen saw how Xiao Man still did not plan on stopping, he finally could not help but cut her off. "Xiao Man, let's discuss the alliance first." "Alliance?" Xiao Man came up with an evil idea when she heard that. She looked at Ziyun and giggled. "It's not like I know anything about alliances. You might as well discuss it with Sister Ziyun. I'll follow whatever Sister Ziyun decides on. Sister Ziyun, you have to talk with Brother Jianchen properly. I'll go cultivate first." With that, Xiao Man pulled a face cheekily at Ziyun as she secretly said to her, "Sister Ziyun, I've created an opportunity for you to spend time alone with Brother Jianchen. You have to make good use of it." "Look at you, what are you talking about?" Ziyun blushed slightly. She could not help but retort gently. However, she glanced at Jianchen with a rather guilty conscience, and her heartbeat sped up. A secret message from someone with Xiao Man's level of cultivation could not be hidden from even a god king, let alone Jianchen who was even more powerful. As a result, Ziyun knew that Jianchen had heard what Xiaoman just said. She must have done it on purpose, she cursed inside, but she actually felt rather eager and experienced a sweet feeling. Lady Ziyun, since Xiaoman has given you the power to decide, you'll represent the Neptunian Divine Palace in discussing the exact details of the alliance with our martial soul lineage, Jianchen said. His expression was completely natural, as if he did not hear anything at all. Ziyun immediately felt slightly disappointed when she saw Jianchen's ignorant behavior. However, she showed none of it. She only sucked in a deep breath and began a formal discussion with Jianchen. The discussion about the alliance was very simple. It was just an agreement on a military alliance between the martial soul lineage and the Neptunian Divine Palace. The martial soul lineage would take responsibility for protecting the Neptunian Divine Palace, keeping its master safe before she became powerful. On the other hand, the Neptunian Divine Palace only needed to help out the martial soul lineage in battles elsewhere as a high-quality god artifact. Very soon, Jianchen mentioned all the requests and suggestions brought up by Hunzong and the others. The greatest enemy of your martial soul lineage is only the Radiant Saint Hall. Forming an alliance with the martial soul lineage is basically having the Radiant Saint Hall replace all the peak experts who have been chasing us through outer space. Alright then, it's no problem. I'll agree to the alliance in Xiaoman's place. At least we'll be able to cultivate peacefully after we've formed the alliance. Ziyun agreed without any hesitation because the martial soul lineage's request was very simple. It was not particularly demanding. Moreover, the Neptunian Divine Hall's side would benefit more, so there was nothing to think too much about. If that's the case, I'll go tell my seniors. Jianchen immediately stood up. He was about to leave the Neptunian Divine Palace now that his objective was completed. Jianchen. Ziyun stood up and called at him. Jianchen paused and looked back. Lady Ziyun, is there anything else? When she saw Jianchen's confused face, the light in Ziyun's eyes flickered. She gritted her teeth and worked up the courage. Why don't you spend some more time here? You're in such a hurry to leave. There was some hidden bitterness in her voice. There's no need. My seniors are still waiting for me to tell them the results of the discussion. We're all going to be on the Martial Soul Mountain in the future anyway, so we'll have plenty of opportunities to see each other. Jianchen replied politely before leaving the Neptunian Divine Palace without even looking back. Ziyun stood around the stone table as she stared in Jianchen's direction blankly. There was undisguised disappointment and gloom on her face. Chapter 2478. Astonishing growth. From then onwards, the Martial Soul Mountain gained a divine hall, the Neptunian Divine Palace. Ever since the master of the Neptunian Divine Palace, Xiaoman, arrived on the Martial Soul Mountain, she rarely appeared. She spent most of her time cultivating. After all the running and everything else she had experienced in the past few years, she deeply understood the importance of personal strength, which was why she worked extremely hard. As for Ziyun, she would walk around the Martial Soul Mountain frequently. Aside from visiting the 7 other successors, she would spend most of her time strolling around where Jianchen entered seclusion. However, Jianchen entered secluded cultivation right after the negotiation for the alliance ended. He completely ignored the matters happening around him. Even though Ziyun had visited where Jianchen cultivated many times, she never disturbed him. She only stood in the distance, looking at Jianchen's figure quietly. After a while, she would leave with some disappointment. In the blink of an eye, a decade had already passed since the Neptunian Divine Palace and the Martial Soul Mountain established an alliance. Everything had been peaceful on the Martial Soul Mountain. Even though many peak experts knew that the Neptunian Divine Palace was on the Martial Soul Mountain, none of them dared to set foot there. Jianchen did not spend these 10 years practicing the secret techniques involving martial soul force. Instead, he chose to refine his 4th strand of profound sword chi. He sat on the empty ground as sword chi swam around him. An invisible sword intent revolved around him. It was more powerful sometimes and weaker at other times. As a result, he would shine with a surging glow from time to time, illuminating the entire Martial Soul Mountain. After 10 years of refinement, He had reached an extremely crucial point in the creation of his fourth strand of profound sword chi. 10 kilometers away, Ziyun stood on a rock in a white dress. She possessed beauty that outshone the moon. Even though she was not as pretty as Shangguan Mu'er, she was still utterly enchanting, enough for countless men to worship her. She stood there quietly as she stared right at Jian Chen with her pitch-black pupils. It has been 10 years. It has been 10 years already. I haven't struck up a single conversation with him since he left the Neptunian Divine Palace 10 years ago. I wonder when he'll finish cultivating. Ziyun sighed inside as she quietly stared at the figure in the distance. She behaved the same today as any other day. After staring for 2 hours, she turned around to leave. However, at this moment, a strand of extremely powerful sword chi suddenly condensed in the distance. A finger-sized, silver-white sword chi hovered above Jian Chen's head, shining with blinding light. It was as dazzling as the sun. The sword chi seemed to contain a mysterious power, allowing it to bypass all bodily defenses and directly affect the soul. Ziyun, who originally wanted to leave, stopped subconsciously. She could not help but look at the strand of sword chi above Jian Chen's head, and she immediately felt a piercing pain in her eyes. Even her soul felt like it was being ripped apart. It was as if it had been stabbed by countless sword chi. What is this ability? My soul was almost injured from just a glance. Ziyun was utterly shocked. She immediately closed her eyes and hid behind a rock in a flash, no longer daring to look at it again. I've finally condensed my fourth strand of profound sword chi. A while later, the devastating sword intent slowly disappeared, and Jian Chen opened his eyes. Now that he had refined his fourth strand of profound sword chi, the strength of the other 3 strands had increased slightly as well. Now, my profound sword chi can cause even greater harm to 9th heavenly layer infinite primes. If I fought against the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime from the Gloomwater sect again, it won't be as difficult as before for me to kill him even if I don't use martial soul force, thought Jian Chen. His fourth strand of profound sword chi made his confidence swell. The profound sword chi I used back then in the Gloomwater sect was discovered by many peak experts, but not a single one of them recognized its origins. It looks like there are extremely few Grand Primes in the Saints world who recognize the profound sword chi. But fair enough. After all, the profound sword chi was invented by the old master of the sword spirits. With his cultivation as a Grand Exalt, only Grand Exalts of the Saints world can force him to use the profound sword chi. Grand Primes obviously wouldn't have the right to learn about it. It looks like there's no need for me to hide my profound sword chi so much in the future. After all, the profound sword chi isn't like the twin swords. Not a lot of people know about them, Jian Chen thought. Afterwards, with another thought, a thin tendril appeared from the space ring on his finger. The tendril constantly extended out, turning into an extremely colorful flower that was only 3 inches tall. It sat in his palm. This was the immortal devouring orchid. You finally reached God King. You haven't wasted all my nurturing. Jian Chen looked at the immortal devouring orchid before waving his hand gently. The immortal devouring orchid immediately dropped onto the ground and rapidly swelled. In the end, it swelled to several hundred meters tall. Countless tendrils danced around beneath it, wanting to root into the ground. Unfortunately, the martial soul mountain was too tough, and the mountain was protected by a mysterious power. As such, no matter how it tried, it was unable to root down. You should be able to devour primordial realm corpses now. Here's a first heavenly layer infinite prime. Jian Chen waved his hand. Immediately, a primordial realm corpse flew out and fell onto the ground. As if the immortal devouring orchid had just seen a source of great nourishment, it became extremely excited. Countless tendrils stretched over and wrapped around the corpse. Some of the roots directly stabbed into the corpse and started sucking away at it. Afterwards, a thought appeared. After becoming a god king, the immortal devouring orchid had developed intelligence. Although it could not talk, it could communicate with thoughts. What? A corpse isn't enough? Jian Chen was stunned, but without any hesitation he tossed out another corpse. It was also a first heavenly layer infinite prime. Immediately, the second corpse was wrapped by the tendrils of the immortal devouring orchid. Afterwards, its huge flower seemed to become a gaping mouth, devouring both corpses in one gulp. Jianchen, what is this? At this moment, Ziyun arrived before Jianchen as well. She stared right at the immortal devouring orchid as she showed a look of interest. It's probably a wondrous plant that I'm raising, said Jianchen. After devouring the two corpses, the immortal devouring orchid seemed to reach its limit. It shook as it shrank, slowly climbing back onto Jianchen's right hand and entering the space ring again. Two primordial realm corpses were indeed its limit. It needed to digest them immediately. I feel like it's very powerful. Even though it only has the presence of an early god king, I feel like it's a mid-god king, said Ziyun. It is indeed extraordinary, or I wouldn't go to such great lengths to raise it, said Jianchen. The immortal devouring orchid grew even faster than he had previously imagined. This filled him with anticipation. If this continued, the immortal devouring orchid would grow to a level where it could help him before long. Of course, he had to provide the immortal devouring orchid with enough food first. Chapter 2479. Yu Chao injured Ziyun sat down beside Jianchen and stared at the side of his face. Young Master Jianchen's talent is outstanding and rare. You've just become an infinite prime recently, yet you already have the power to kill 9th heavenly layer infinite primes. You're thousands of times more impressive than those supreme prodigies raised by peak organizations in the Saints' world. I wonder how outstanding a woman has to be for her to be worthy of you. However, as soon as she said that, Ziyun felt like she had just said something inappropriate. How did she reach the topic of Jianchen's love life? It seemed like she was purposefully asking about it. It was far too obvious. Ziyun felt absent-minded after realizing what she had just asked. Her heart beat rapidly as she became nervous. She thought, what's up with me? Why did I suddenly ask something like this? In the past 10 years, did I? With young Master Jianchen. As soon as she thought of that, Ziyun could not help but blush slightly. She seemed rather embarrassed like a little girl. Jianchen sat there calmly. He stared off into space and said gently, I'm already married. With that, Ziyun immediately stiffened up. Her face immediately became rather pale, and her beating heart felt like it was being ripped apart. Any person with some level of status has many wives in the Saints' world. With how outstanding Jianchen is, it's nothing special for him to have a partner already. But very quickly, Ziyun calmed down. In that instant, she thought of a lot of things and completely accepted them. She even calmed down. You already have a partner, but you can take on more. A supreme prodigy as outstanding as young Master Jianchen might have many wives in the future, Ziyun said softly. Jianchen shook his head gently and said calmly, I already have 3 wives, but I've let down every single one of them. I've failed to live up to the role of a husband. Moreover, I'm completely devoted to cultivation, always working harder to reach a higher level of cultivation. I haven't considered any aspects of love at all, so I don't plan on taking on another woman in the future. Perhaps my path is more suitable for being taken alone, without anything tying me back. Jianchen completely understood that Ziyun had developed feelings for him, but he had always treated her as a regular friend. He had never considered that, so he directly turned her down. I hope Ziyun can understand, thought Jianchen. In reality, he could already tell 10 years ago that Ziyun had developed feelings for him unknowingly. The 10 years of cultivation, in a certain sense, was avoidance. Unfortunately, Ziyun just could not see. No, perhaps she already saw, but she refused to believe it. She refused to give up. She truly would not stop unless she reached a dead end, which was why he could only say something like that. Him never accepting another woman for the rest of his life could completely shatter any hope that Ziyun held. Ziyun fell silent. She did not say anything at all. She only stared at the vast cosmos beyond the martial Soul Mountain rather blankly. She was dejected. At that moment, she felt like the world before her had lost its former color. It had become dull. Even though the outside world was colorful and varied, vast and beautiful, and her future path of cultivation would be smooth, she suddenly felt that everything was pointless. At this moment, a figure directly fell over from beyond the Martial Soul Mountain. He was in free fall, directly falling towards the Martial Soul Mountain. It's third senior. Jian Chen recognized the falling figure right away. He happened to be Jian Chen's third senior, Yu Chao. His face changed and he immediately ignored Ziyun beside him. He directly charged into the air, piercing through the sky as a resplendent streak of light like a strand of sword qi. He arrived before Yu Chao in an instant and caught him. Third senior, why are you injured? Landing back onto the ground, Jian Chen looked at the bloodied, pale-faced Yu Chao. He was extremely stern. He could tell with a single glance that Yu Chao had suffered very heavy wounds. Yu Chao was one of the 3 peak chaotic primes of the martial soul lineage. With his current strength and martial soul force, he would be able to put up a fight against some regular grand primes or even kill them. However, he had become injured like this now. Third junior, who made you like this? With a flash, Han Zong arrived before Yu Chao. He immediately took out a god-tier pill and fed it to Yu Chao. His face was terrifyingly sunken. Third junior, why are you so injured? Third senior, third senior. Afterwards, all the successors of the martial soul lineage made their way over. They all emerged from seclusion, gathering around Yu Chao. All of their faces were sunken as killing intent surged from them. After ingesting a healing pill, Yu Chao's situation took a turn for the better. He coughed out some blood a few times and slowly stood up. I concealed myself and went to the desolate plain to check on some information about the protector swords, but I never thought I would be seen through in the end. Did Yu Chen injure you? Han Zong growled. Yu Chen was the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Yu Chao shook his head. It was not Yu Chen. Is it Xianzhan then? Aside from Yu Chen, only Xianzhan poses a threat to you from the Radiant Saint Hall. Even though Xianzhan is only a peak chaotic prime, his battle prowess rivals grand primes, said Chu Jian. It's not Xianzhan either. It's a wielder of a protector sword, said Yu Chao. What? You encountered a wielder of a protector sword? Everyone was shocked as they collectively stared at Yu Chao. Even Jian Chen became stern. He had already heard about the protector swords of the Radiant Saint Hall. It was exactly because of their existence that the martial soul lineage experienced a threat, causing them to seek people to ally with. Although he had not seen the protector swords before, he could tell that they were extremely powerful from what Han Zong and the others said. After all, it was because of the protector swords that the Radiant Saint Hall was now the most powerful organization on the desolate plain. Yu Chao exhaled deeply. I've basically gotten to the bottom of the protector swords. The protector swords are indeed extremely powerful and possess earth-shaking might. I think our martial soul lineage has no one that can match up to a protector sword in an open battle. However, the protector swords have fatal weakness as well. The protector swords lack the power of laws equivalent to its inherent power. I think that's because the wielders possess far too low cultivations. Originally, I only fought against a single person with a protector sword. Although I did not dare to clash with them openly, I was able to maneuver around them with the depth of my cultivation, preventing the person from attacking me. However, when the second protector sword appeared, they forced me to flee with injuries. Third senior, do you know who the wielders are? Su Qi asked. The terrifying power of the protector swords protect the wielders, masking their presence and appearance. I was unable to see who they were, nor was I able to harm them. Yu Chao became rather stern and continued, you need to get through the protective power around the wielder first in order to harm them. This layer of protective power seems to possess a sliver of an extremely ancient imprint of consciousness, allowing it to block my martial soul force. As a result, my martial soul force was completely useless against the wielders. It was unable to penetrate their defense. With that, all the members of the martial soul lineage became extremely grim. Chapter 2480. Returning to the desolate plain, the protective power from the protector swords could actually block their martial soul force. That really was bad news for them. This was because their martial soul force would become completely useless before the wielders of the protector swords. Why would it be like this? What are the origins of the protector swords? They can even block our martial soul force, Chu Jian said sternly. There has never been an item or existence that can block our martial soul force in the history of our lineage. None of the ancient archives have any records of something like that, said Su Qi with a frown. The Radiant Saint Hall now has 6 protector swords. What will our martial soul lineage use to handle them in the future? Yun Ziding asked solemnly. For a moment, all 8 successors of the martial soul lineage fell silent. The protector swords were so powerful and the Radiant Saint Hall had gained 6 of them all of a sudden. Coupled with their leader, Yu Qin, the vice leaders, and the elders, they were several times more powerful than the martial soul lineage now. Even with their alliance with the Neptunian Divine Palace, they were unable to make up for this difference. Senior Yu Chao, may I ask who the wielders are? Jian Chen suddenly asked a while later. The identities of the 6 wielders have not all been made public. I only know 2 of them, and they're Donglin Yanxue and Han Xian, said Yu Chao. What? 2 of the wielders are Donglin Yanxue and Han Xian? Jian Chen was alarmed and stunned. He was clearly taken aback. He was familiar with both of them. Of the 2, Donglin Yanxue was not as surprising. She was the chosen saint of the Radiant Saint Hall, and her talent was outstanding. As such, it made sense for her to obtain a protector sword. However, both Han Xian's talent and potential were only average in the Radiant Saint Hall. He was not special, so him managing to inherit a protector sword surprised Jian Chen. Has it got to do with the artifact spirit? Jian Chen suspected secretly as the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. After a moment of hesitation, he stood up and immediately bid farewell to Hun Zong and the others. He told them he wanted to go to the desolate plain. You can't. The Radiant Saint Hall is powerful on the desolate plain. Although they're not exactly the supreme rulers, they're not far from it now. 8th Junior, you're also the person that the Radiant Saint Hall resents the most, so it's too dangerous for you to go to the desolate plain, Hun Zong said immediately. That's right. 8th Junior, you've taken away the Grand Exalt's cultivation method from the Radiant Saint Hall. The Radiant Saint Hall is currently looking for you everywhere. If you go to the desolate plain, you're basically entering the belly of the beast. 8th Junior, you can't go to the desolate plain. After all, you don't possess strength like Senior Yu Chao. The other successors tried to persuade him as well. Seniors, do not worry. I have my methods of hiding, so I can prevent anyone from discovering me. You can't forget how I managed to elude so many peak experts and all their exceptional abilities back on the desolate plain. My strength is obviously not as great as Senior Yu Chao's, but my ability to stay hidden is probably greater than any of you, Jian Chen said confidently. Not only did he have the mask from Emotongyun, which would cover his presence completely, he also had the jade pendant from the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing, which prevented innate abilities like what the Elder of Mountains and Seas possessed from finding him. With those 2 factors, he could truly reach perfection with his disguises. Unless it was a supreme expert like the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing, basically no one in the Saints' world could see through his disguises. Swish! Jian Chen immediately turned into a streak of light and shot off the Martial Soul Mountain with lightning speed. He vanished into the vast sea of stars in an instant, leaving by himself. Has Jian Chen left? After Jian Chen's departure, the gloomy Zi Yun arrived as well. She looked at the people of the martial soul lineage with hollow eyes. Su Qi sighed inside when she saw Zi Yun's appearance. She said softly, 8th Junior is only leaving the martial soul mountain temporarily. He'll be back before long. Zi Yun said nothing. She turned around and left rather gloomily, disappearing into the Neptunian Divine Palace. A powerful streak of light shot through outer space like a comet, covering ground rapidly. Within the streak of light was Jian Chen, who was holding a star chart. He navigated his way as he unleashed his full speed. With my current speed, I only need 3 days to reach the closest interplanar teleportation formation, thought Jian Chen. He did not teleport to the desolate plain using the power of the Martial Soul Mountain this time. Instead, he planned on using teleportation formations. Each time the Martial Soul Mountain teleported someone, It would consume a tremendous amount of power. Moreover, it would form a huge target, which could be easily discovered by people. It would be inconvenient given the purpose of his visit. If he used interplanar teleportation formations, he would be able to truly avoid any and all attention. 3 days later, Jianchen arrived on the great planet closest to him. He paid some 5-colored divine crystals and stepped into the teleportation formation. Although I've lost the Ineta Tower, the mask from Senior Mo Tianyan can disguise the divine hull on me too, preventing the formation from discovering anything living on me, thought Jianchen. Every single interplanar formation forbid people carrying spatial artifacts with living creatures inside. This was to prevent people from moving large numbers of people and affecting their profits. After all, an interplanar teleportation formation was a moneymaker for any peak organization. They would never let anyone reduce their earnings. Of course, this rule could be ignored if one had powerful strength or a great background. Several dozen teleportation formations were arranged in a large square in the center of the imperial capital of the Violet Wind Empire. The teleportation formations constantly flickered as cultivators flowed in and out. It was clearly extremely busy. Of course, the teleportation formations that constantly flickered could only take people across planes. The larger teleportation formations that could take people across planes were clearly much more quiet. They would normally go for around a dozen days or more without lighting up. Several dozen soldiers were stationed around the interplanar teleportation formations. The person who stood out the most among the soldiers was an extremely unkempt man. He was laying back on a cane chair. He seemed to be extremely comfortable. At this moment, one of the interplanar teleportation formations suddenly lit up. With an intense flash of white light, a white-robed middle-aged man with a striking appearance emerged. The middle-aged man was Jianchen after changing his appearance. Jianchen caught sight of the unkempt old man on the cane chair nearby. His expression did not change, but he sighed emotionally inside. I left here several dozen years ago. I never thought I would return now. Although the unkempt old man had shown him kindness in the past, Jianchen also understood what his identity was right now. He could not show that he knew the unkempt old man, so he did not look at the old man much at all. He walked out of the teleportation and disappeared into the sea of people very soon. However, unbeknownst to him, when he was about to disappear into the sea of people, the unkempt old man's eyes suddenly snapped open. He glanced at Jianchen with suspicion and wondered, why has this troublemaker come here again? Wherever this kid goes, there's never peace. He went to the Star Brilliance a while back, but in the end, a Grand Prime died for no reason and drew out 9 brilliance. Afterwards, he went to the Aqua Plane and destroyed a large sect there. Now, he has actually returned to the Desolate Plane. I hope he doesn't make a mess of the Desolate Plane like last time. Chapter 2481. The Donglin clan in the bustling city closest to the Radiant Saint Hall in the central region of the Desolate Plain, Jianchen ordered a few small dishes. He was currently disguised as a middle-aged man. He sat in an extremely busy inn and tasted the dishes slowly. He stared out the window in the direction of the Radiant Saint Hall. The inn had many customers. Not only were there cultivators from everywhere, but white-robed Radiant Saint Masters would come in from time to time as well. Moreover, since the inn was one of the few high-class inns in the city, the prices were extremely high. As a result, all the people who came here were wealthy. From how many of them dressed and acted, it was possible to tell that they came from large organizations with a single glance. People from many organizations and a few disciples of the Radiant Saint Hall gathered together. They all got along extremely well. As a matter of fact, people dressed like representatives of large organizations would greet the Radiant Saint Masters they encountered with a face full of smiles. They did not act haughty at all. Ever since the appearance of the Protector Swords, the Radiant Saint Hall's status had greatly changed. Not only did they become the greatest organization on the Desolate Plain all of a sudden, but they also became a target for many peak organizations to befriend. Many organizations beyond the Desolate Plain had sent people to visit them with rich gifts. The city closest to the Radiant Saint Hall obviously became a place for these people to temporarily settle down. Jian Chen glanced past the guests of the inn from time to time as he sat by the window. He could tell with a single glance that many of them were god kings, and even primordial realm experts would appear from time to time. Moreover, that was not just this inn. He could clearly sense that there were many primordial realm experts gathered within the city. Of course, they were basically all infinite primes. The appearance of the 6 protector swords has made the Radiant Saint Hall the dominant force on the desolate plain, drawing in guests from everywhere. I wonder if the appearance of the protector swords is related with the Tower of Radiance? Ever since I left the Radiant Saint Hall, I lost all contact with the artifact spirit. I wonder how he's doing now. Jian Chen sat by the window and drank by himself. He thought of many things. I need to find a way into the Radiant Saint Hall and see Teacher Han Xin or Donglin Yanxue. But since they're wielders of protector swords now, their identities are completely different from before. Meeting them will probably be difficult. Jian Chen thought inside. It had already been 7 days since his arrival. He did not try to infiltrate the Radiant Saint Hall recklessly during those 7 days. Instead, he remained here, secretly investigating everything he could about the Radiant Saint Hall. He needed to understand who the wielders of the protector swords were. However, the Radiant Saint Hall kept this information a strict secret. Apart from Donglin Yanxue and Han Xin, whose identities they had made public, very few people knew who the other 4 were. I heard that the Chosen Saint has returned to the Donglin clan again. Sigh. It's all because of that Jian Chen. If it weren't for him, the Chosen Saint would never distance herself so far from our Radiant Saint Hall. At this moment, the conversation between a few Radiant Saint masters nearby caught Jian Chen's attention. Although the Chosen Saint has become a protector, and her identity as Chosen Saint has been reinstated, I can clearly feel that the Chosen Saint doesn't have a strong sense of belonging to our Radiant Saint Hall anymore. It's all because of Jian Chen. Jian Chen concealed himself as Chang Yang and secretly infiltrated out Radiant Saint Hall, stealing away our supreme legacy. He's utterly despicable. Even the Chosen Saint suffered because of him, isn't that right? Although the Chosen Saint has become a protector of our Radiant Saint Hall, she feels guilt because of how she worked with Chang Yang when they went to the world of Moon and Star. She no longer feels that she can stay in the Radiant Saint Hall, which is why she remains in the Donglin clan most of the time. These Radiant Saint Masters were not powerful. They were all either gods or over-gods. They discussed fearlessly as they enjoyed the delicious food. They would glance at the eavesdropping people of great status in the surroundings from time to time, and they slightly struggled to conceal their pride. The Radiant Saint Hall had become the greatest organization on the desolate plain, so their regular disciples all gained a sense of supremacy. Donglin Yanxue is in the Donglin clan? Jian Chen was immediately interested. After a moment of thought, he tossed out some supreme-grade divine crystals, stood up, and left. Visiting Donglin Yanxue in the Donglin clan was slightly easier than infiltrating the Radiant Saint Hall. The Donglin clan was a peak organization on the desolate plain because their ancestor, Donglin Su, was a grand prime. However, he had only broken through recently. The Donglin clan was not located in the central region. Instead, it was in the western region, within the territory of a place called the Wilderness Empire. The Wilderness Empire was among the handful of everlasting empires on the desolate plain. They possessed a vast territory and ruled over the western region. At this moment, there was a flash within Donglin City in the Wilderness Empire. Jian Chen had directly arrived in the western region through a regional teleportation formation. Donglin City originally possessed a different name. However, after the ancestor of the Donglin clan, Donglin Su, broke through, the city was bestowed upon the Donglin clan by the Wilderness Empire. His name was changed to Donglin City. It was no longer under the rule of the Wilderness Empire, becoming the personal property of the Donglin clan. Their status was equivalent to the Dong'an provincial city in the Pingtian Empire. The Donglin clan ruled over the Donglin City. As soon as Jian Chen arrived in Donglin City, he made his way to the Donglin clan. Everyone knew where the Donglin clan was within Donglin City. He did not even have to investigate it to find its location. This was because the current Donglin clan was extremely busy. A few visitors from various places would basically gather at the entrance every day. Even some princes of the Wilderness Empire would come regularly with rich gifts. Of course, the Donglin clan was rather different from the Radiant Saint Hall. All the visiting organizations would bring their most outstanding juniors along. There were quite a few princes from the other everlasting empires on the desolate plain as well. Their intentions were obvious. Your Highness, you've come again. If you want to meet our patriarch, you're more than welcome to, but if you want to meet the young lady, it's not like you don't know her temperament. Young Master Yen, I must apologize. Our young lady is cultivating. She has specially passed on the message that she's not meeting anyone. How about this, young Master Zeline? I'll accept your gift for the young lady for now, and I'll pass on your message to her. However, I can't guarantee whether the young lady will want to see you. Before he had even gotten close to the Donglin clan, Jianchen saw many handsome young men in luxurious clothes gathered there. All of their origins were impressive, and they possessed great status. They all wished to see Donglin Yanxue. Jianchen immediately frowned at the sight of this. It seems like meeting Donglin Yanxue would not be as easy as he had originally imagined. Chapter 2482. The acquaintance from Moon's Reflection Lake. Jianchen studied the Donglin clan and discovered that the entire place was enveloped by a powerful formation. The formation had already been activated, making the barrier truly impenetrable. The only way in and out was the entrance of the Donglin clan. Infiltration was completely impossible. It looks like secretly meeting Donglin Yanxue is impossible. I can only pay a visit like everyone else. Even if I raise the attention of some people, there's nothing I can do about it, Jianchen thought. After a moment of silence, he finally arrived at the entrance of the clan and said to an attendant, "Please help me pass on the message that an acquaintance has come to visit Miss Donglin Yanxue and that the acquaintance's hopes to meet the young miss." The attendant of the Donglin clan studied Jianchen. When he saw how Jianchen had come alone and did not bring anyone with him, he immediately showed a sliver of contempt. Moreover, what seemed even funnier to him was that all the organizations who had come to visit the Donglin clan bore rich gifts, while Jianchen had actually come empty-handed. The attendant felt even more disdain towards Jianchen from how he did not plan on giving anything. "And you call yourself the young lady's acquaintance? In my opinion, your so-called acquaintanceship is only seeing each other at most. Now that the young miss has become a wielder of a protector sword, her status has swelled tremendously. You just want to use this tiny connection to befriend the young miss. Who knows how many people like you I've seen in the past few years," thought the attendant. That was indeed the case. After Donglin Yanxue inherited a protector sword, both her status and identity changed. As a result, many people wanted to befriend her and establish ties with her. In particular, the stronger disciples of the Radiant Saint Hall, Peak Lords, or elders would frequently come to the Donglin clan to meet Donglin Yanxue. A few hallowed saint masters who clearly did not have any significant ties with her would use whatever they could to try and get close to her, saying that they were her seniors or had once provided her with guidance. There were all sorts of excuses. There were plenty of people who had seen Donglin Yanxue once in the past, and then they suddenly refer to themselves as Donglin Yanshue's acquaintance. As a result, the attendant was filled with contempt when he heard Jianchen refer to himself as Donglin Yanshue's acquaintance. "Our young lady is not meeting anyone. Please return," the attendant said neither rudely nor politely. Jianchen did not care about his attitude at all. He continued, "Please tell her that the acquaintance from the Moon's Reflection Lake has come to visit. Whether your young lady wants to meet me or not should be up to her to decide." "What acquaintance from the Moon's Reflection Lake?" "Our young lady has said she's not meeting anyone." The attendant became fed up. Jianchen frowned. He became slightly stern and said forcefully, "I'll come clean. I have something extremely important to talk to Miss Donglin Yanxue about. If something happens, are you able to bear the blame from the young miss? If you tell her, you won't be in the wrong even if the young lady declines. However, if you really end up getting in the way of the young lady's matters, the consequences will be severe." When the attendant saw how serious Jianchen was, he became rather uncertain as well. He began to hesitate. All right then. Just wait here. I'll pass on the message. In the end, the attendant was scared into doing Jian Chen's bidding, turning around and disappearing from the entrance of the Donglin clan. There were many attendants like that at the entrance of the Donglin clan. As a matter of fact, there were people dressed as caretakers in charge of receiving important guests, so what happened with Jian Chen did not raise any attention at all. The attendant ran over to a beautiful courtyard within the Donglin clan in a hurry. That was where Donglin Yanxue cultivated and resided, but now, the place had been labeled as a forbidden ground by the Donglin clan. No one was allowed to enter. The courtyard was watched over by its own female attendants. They were basically Donglin Yanxue's personal attendants. The attendant arrived before a female attendant and passed on Jian Chen's message word for word. He had no right to see Donglin Yanxue, so he could only give the message to Donglin Yanxue's attendant for her to pass it on. The female attendant was called Qiu Han, the person who had been with Donglin Yanxue the longest. She basically grew up with Donglin Yanxue. Qiu Han basically knew Donglin Yanxue better than anyone else in the Donglin clan. As soon as she heard the message, she scoffed, "What acquaintance from the moon's reflection lake? I've been with the young miss for so many years. If the young miss really has an acquaintance like that, how would I not know? It's probably just someone who wants to grow close to the young lady. There's no need to pay any attention to someone like that. Send him away." The attendant did not dare to say anything else before Donglin Yanshue's personal attendant. He turned around and left. Qiu Han looked at the time of the day before entering the courtyard. She arrived beside a lake with great familiarity. The lake was not large, roughly 100 meters across. There was a large rock in the center, and Donglin Yanxue currently sat there. A dense layer of light enveloped her, and the laws of the hallowed wrapped around her. Clearly, she was cultivating. "Young miss, it's time." Qiu Han stood by the lake and called out. Her beautiful eyes were filled with undisguised admiration and respect. After Donglin Yanxue became the wielder of a protector sword, she became treated with great importance by the ancestor of the Donglin clan. He completely treated her like a treasure, personally guiding her cultivation. As a result, Donglin Yanxue would visit the ancestor of the Donglin clan frequently. Donglin Yanxue stopped cultivating. She opened her eyes slowly and light gathered below her feet. She floated to the edge of the lake like she was a cloud, making her way out. Qiu Han followed behind her. "Why do I feel slightly uneasy? Qiu Han, what has happened recently?" Donglin Yanxue suddenly asked as she made her way to where the ancestor cultivated. Qiu Han followed behind Donglin Yanxue politely. She shook her head and said, "Young miss, everything has been peaceful recently. Nothing major has happened. It's just that more and more people are coming to visit the young miss. In order to establish ties with the young miss, these people can really come up with anything. They're basically willing to go to any length. Even some so-called seniors and juniors from the Radiant Saint Hall had come, or even some acquaintance from the moon's reflection lake. These people are all shameless. Just to meet the young miss, they're willing to do anything. However, I've followed your orders from before and sent all those people away." Donglin Yanxue was originally calm, but when she heard "acquaintance from Moon Reflections Lake," she suddenly stiffened. She suddenly stopped, almost causing Qiu Han to run into her. Donglin Yanxue abruptly turned around and stared right at Qiu Han. She said in a flustered voice, "What did you just say? What did you just say?" "Young miss, what's wrong?" Qiu Han was stunned when she saw Donglin Yanxue's violent reaction. Qiu Han had followed her for so many years, but she had never seen Donglin Yanxue lose her composure. "Qiu Han, what did you just say? Can you say it again?" Donglin Yanxue struggled to remain composed as she grabbed Qiu Han's shoulders tightly. "Young miss, everything has been peaceful." Qiu Han was truly frightened. She felt unsettled and uneasy, repeating what she had just said in a trembling, stammering voice. "Moon's reflection lake. Moon's reflection lake," Donglin Yanxue repeated gently. She was extremely excited right now, where even her body trembled gently. The moon's reflection lake was where she first met Jian Chen, was it not? That night, when she met Jian Chen at the moon's reflection lake, only the two of them knew. There was no one else. Where is he? Where is he? Tell me, where the acquaintance from the moon's reflection lake is. Donglin Yanxue asked hurriedly. She only had one acquaintance from the moon's reflection lake. No one knew about him aside from her. Young miss, I've already… No, he should still be waiting at the main entrance, Qiu Han faltered as she paled in fright. Now, she could tell that this so-called acquaintance of Moon's reflection lake really was familiar with the young lady. Originally, Qiu Han wanted to say that she had sent him away, but she changed it forcefully when she was about to say that. Swish! With a flash, Donglin Yanxue vanished. At that moment, she directly cast the visit to the ancestor of the Donglin clan aside and flew towards the main entrance as quickly as she could. Qiu Han became sheet-white as she stared in the direction that Donglin Yanxue had vanished off to. She said in a trembling voice, "Oh no, oh no. How is this acquaintance from the moon's reflection lake actually acquainted with the young miss? And looking at how the young miss behaved, they're probably close. Yet I've turned him away. I just hope he hasn't left yet, or I really don't know how the young miss will punish me." Chapter 2483. They finally meet. Jianchen stood with his hands behind his back at the entrance of the Donglin clan, waiting there quietly. Very soon, the attendant returned to the main entrance. He glanced at Jianchen and waved his hand coldly. "Go back to where you came from. Don't stick around. The entrance of our Donglin clan is not a place that just anyone can loiter around." If it were before, the attendant really would have doubted if this person knew the young miss, so he did not dare to offend him too much. However, now that he had met with Qiu Han, he was completely carefree. After all, Qiu Han was the personal attendant who had been with the young lady for the longest. If even Qiu Han had not heard of this so-called acquaintance from Moon's reflection lake, he obviously did not exist. As a result, the attendant showed no politeness at all towards Jianchen after confirming who the latter was. Jianchen sighed inside. He knew the attendant did not really pass his message on to Donglin Yanxue, or it would have been impossible for her to not see him. However, he had no other choice either. After all, he needed to keep his identity concealed. He could not expose his strength, forcing him to take actions that would not raise a lot of attention. Otherwise, with his identity as a primordial realm expert, he had the right to enter the Donglin clan even if he could not see Donglin Yanxue. It looks like I need to come up with another method, thought Jianchen. He turned around and was about to leave. However, at this moment, an intense ball of light suddenly descended, shining like the sun. Donglin Yanxue stood within the light, obscured by it from time to time. "It's Miss Yanxue. It's actually Miss Yanxue, Miss Donglin Yanxue. We finally meet. It's almost impossible for us to meet with Miss Donglin Yanxue. I never thought Miss Donglin Yanxue would actually come out herself." The eyes of all the visitors gathered at the entrance lit up. They immediately became elated. Immediately, all the young masters from the peak organizations and the princes of everlasting empires smiled amiably to show off their charm, presenting themselves before Donglin Yanxue in the most perfect manner possible. In the blink of an eye, a large group of people gathered beside Donglin Yanxue. She seemed like the center of attention. "Greetings, young miss." All the guards and attendants at the entrance of the Donglin clan bowed. Donglin Yanxue slowly dispersed the light around her. Her eyes were filled with undisguised excitement and eagerness as she glanced past everyone. There was also some fear and worry in her eyes. She was very afraid and very worried that she had come for nothing and would not meet the person she wanted to see. In other words, perhaps another person had learnt about what happened at the moon's reflection lake, and she had reached the wrong conclusion. To Donglin Yanxue's disappointment, she failed to see the person she always wanted to see in the crowd. Has he already left? At this moment, Donglin Yanxue became rather gloomy. She felt her heart hollow out as she was unable to hide her disappointment. It has been many years. Miss Yanxue's beauty is even greater than before. I wonder if you still remember me, a past acquaintance of yours? At this moment, a voice rang out. Donglin Yanxue subconsciously looked over to where the voice came from. It had come from a white-robed middle-aged man who seemed to be in his 40s. She had never seen this middle-aged man before. She had no impression of him at all. However, when she made eye contact with the middle-aged man, she immediately became stunned. She could feel a vague sense of familiarity from the middle-aged man. It seemed to overlap with the figure in her head perfectly. "Are you?" Donglin Yenshue's heart trembled gently as she asked with uncertainty. She failed to realize that there were still many young masters of great status gathered around her. All she saw was that foreign figure. Jianchen nodded with a smile in his disguise as a middle-aged man. He did not answer her. However, his calm demeanor immediately excited Donglin Yenshue. She looked at Jianchen deeply as memories and joy rose up in the depths of her eyes. Jianchen knew that Donglin Yenshue had already recognized him. He looked around at the surroundings to remind Donglin Yenshue about the circumstances they were currently in. Donglin Yenshue immediately snapped back to her senses and understood that Jianchen did not want to expose himself yet. She immediately calmed down, regaining her composure before saying to Jianchen, "Come in." With that, Donglin Yenshue did not glance at Jianchen again. She turned around and disappeared into the Donglin clan. "Miss Yenshue," behind, the visitors and young masters all called out, but Donglin Yenshue did not look back at all. She completely ignored them. Jianchen remained at ease, entering the Donglin clan with great composure under the countless envious and jealous gazes. The guards no longer dared to stop him. He actually knows the young lady. Oh no, oh no. The attendant who had received Jianchen had already paled from fright. As soon as he thought about how he had treated Jianchen before, he felt the world around him turn. He felt like the sky was going to collapse on him. Who's that? Why is he allowed to see Miss Yenshue while I'm not? Strange. Why do I feel like Miss Donglin Yenshue personally came just for him? A soft discussion immediately sprang up at the entrance of the Donglin clan after Jianchen had left. The faces of many young masters became rather sunken. Investigate his identity. Let's see what his background is. Many people immediately passed down orders. Donglin Yenshue did not walk far after she entered the Donglin clan. Instead, she stood in the distance and stared towards the entrance. She waited for Jianchen. As a result, as soon as Jianchen entered the Donglin clan, he saw her standing below a large tree. "Here is not a place to talk. Come with me." Donglin Yenshue beckoned Jianchen and brought him to her residence. Young miss, the ancestor." At this moment, Qiuhan ran over. She glanced at Jianchen curiously before telling Donglin Yenshue with some unease. "I have something important today, so I won't be going. Qiuhan, don't let anyone disturb me today, including my father, understood?" Donglin Yenshue said in an order-like fashion. Her voice was rather cold. "Why?" "Yes, young miss," Qiuhan replied politely. She secretly studied Jianchen as she was filled with suspicion. Jianchen followed behind Donglin Yenshue and arrived at her residence before entering a small, wooden building. The building was primarily decorated in pink. It was possible to tell with a single glance that it was where Donglin Yenshue stayed. Chapter 2484, Meeting the Protectors. This is where I stay. Without my permission, no one can enter here, including my personal attendants, and even my father and the ancestor. As a result, you don't have to worry at all here. No one will learn who you are, Donglin Yenshue said to Jianchen. Her cheeks had become slightly blushed as she seemed somewhat unnatural. This was her personal room. Now that she had let a man into her room, she felt like her face was burning. Pausing, Donglin Yenshue seemed to be afraid that Jianchen would misunderstand. She was also afraid that she might seem like she was leading him on. As a result, she explained, "My father and the ancestor can enter the courtyard outside, so it's not safe." Jianchen glanced at Donglin Yenshue deeply and joked, "And I had thought that after becoming a wielder of a protector sword, Miss Yenshue would cease to be the Miss Yenshue I once knew. But it looks like my worries were unnecessary. I'm only a wielder of a protector sword. All my power comes from the protector sword. If I lose the protector sword one day, I'll just be a puny hallowed saint master. There's nothing to be proud about," Donglin Yenshue said slowly. She had thought through everything very well. She did not believe she had truly become a peak expert of the Saints' world just because she wielded a protector sword. She understood that something that did not belong to her was not hers. Jianchen, how have you been recently? I heard you destroyed a peak organization on the aquaplane, Donglin Yanxue said. The two of them sat around a jade table as she personally poured a cup of tea for Jianchen. Jianchen nodded. He mentioned the whole matter in a rough manner and did not go into the details. Afterwards, he asked Donglin Yanxue about the protector swords. After you left, the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance awakened. The protector swords all came from the artifact spirit. Donglin Yanxue hid nothing. She told Jianchen everything she knew, including who the other wielders of the protector swords were. A gleam of light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. After learning who the other wielders were, he understood that these were all the arrangements of the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit really had not let him down. All the people he had some ties with or had once helped him back in the Radiant Saint Hall had become wielders of protector swords now. Jianchen had specially mentioned Bai Yu and Han Xen, so he was not surprised about their possession of protector swords. Jianchen had some ties with Xian Ming as well, while the kindness Xianzhan had shown was evident. If it had not been for Xianzhan, he would not have been able to enter the world of Moon and Star or the Tower of Radiance. As a result, he was not surprised about Xian Ming and Xianzhan obtaining protector swords. What surprised him was Gong Sunji. Gong Sunji was the Grand Exalt's descendant, and after Jianchen took away the method of the Exalted Saint, they had basically become mortal enemies. Gong Sunji had already developed complete hatred towards him back in the Tower of Radiance. However, the artifact spirit had actually made Gong Sunji a wielder of a protector sword, and it was even the strongest protector sword out of the 9, Godslayer's sword. Jianchen felt that something was amiss about that. Is the artifact spirit still bound by the lingering consciousness from the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance? Jianchen thought. The light in his eyes flickered as he asked Donglin Yanxue, how has the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance been? Ever since he bestowed the protector swords, Sir Artifact Spirit hasn't appeared again, said Donglin Yanxue. Jianchen fell silent as he seemed to think about something. Only a while later did he ask, Yu Chao of the Martial Soul lineage was injured by the protector swords of the Radiant Saint Hall. Do you know who did it? Donglin Yanxue stared at Jianchen with slight bitterness and asked, Your main purpose of coming to find me was to investigate the identities of the two people who attacked him, right? Jianchen nodded. He did not try to hide it. Donglin Yanxue sighed gently inside. However, she also understood that she was a part of the Radiant Saint Hall, while Jianchen was a part of the Martial Soul lineage. The two organizations would always be on bad terms, so there would always be an uncrossable chasm between her and Jianchen. The person who fought first was Gong Sunji. Gong Sunji was unable to take down the expert of the Martial Soul lineage, so Xian Ming took action as well, said Donglin Yanxue. Jianchen became relieved. In reality, what he truly worried about was that the people who injured Yu Chao were Donglin Yanxue or Han Xing. Now that he learnt it was Xian Ming and Gong Sunji, he felt slightly better. What about the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall? Didn't he fight? Jianchen asked. The leader observed from a distance and did not take part. In reality, it was not just the leader. Vice Leader Xianzhan did not take action either. Vice Leader Xianzhan is also a wielder of a protector sword. Even though his protector sword doesn't rank very high, his personal strength is already extremely great, so he can unleash even more power from the protector sword. If Vice Leader Xianzhan had joined in, the expert from the Martial Soul lineage might not have been able to escape, said Donglin Yanxue. Then she tried to persuade Jianchen. Jianchen, your Martial Soul lineage is no longer the opponent of the Radiant Saint Hall. It's best if you go back and persuade the others from the Martial Soul lineage. Don't let them come provoking the Radiant Saint Hall anymore. Just stay on the Martial Soul Mountain. With the Martial Soul Mountain, the Radiant Saint Hall might not be able to kill their way in even with the protector swords. Stay on the Martial Soul Mountain? What if we can't do that? Will you hunt down the Martial Soul lineage across the entire Saints world? Jian Chen stared at Donglin Yanxue. Donglin Yanxue shook her head. Bai Yu, Han Xin, and I have reached an agreement. As long as you are on the Martial Soul Mountain, as long as you are a part of the Martial Soul lineage, the three of us will not actively search for you. We'll remain on the desolate plain and protect the Radiant Saint Hall. Of course, I don't know what the three other wielders are thinking. What if the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall orders you to attack the Martial Soul Mountain? Jian Chen asked. After we became wielders of the Protector Swords, we became the protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall. Our statuses are supreme. The leader can no longer order us around. Our current responsibility is to protect the Radiant Saint Hall, said Donglin Yanxue. Jian Chen fell silent. After a moment of thought, he said, Donglin Yanxue, can you help me out? Can you call over Bai Yu, Han Xin, and Xian Ming? I want to see them. At the same time, a middle-aged man with a striking appearance was reading a book with great interest inside one of the studies of the Donglin clan. The middle-aged man was the current patriarch of the Donglin clan, as well as Donglin Yanshue's father, Donglin Han. Patriarch Qiu Han has something to report. At this moment, Donglin Yanshue's personal attendant, Qiu Han, called out from outside. Donglin Han put his book down and let Qiu Han in. He knew that anything Qiu Han would report would be related to his proud daughter. As long as it concerned Donglin Yanxue, he needed to take it seriously. Qiu Han hurried in. She seemed slightly nervous and worried. As soon as she saw Donglin Han, she said in a hurry, Patriarch, there's bad news. The young miss has taken a man into her own room. With the young miss's current identity and prestige, if this matter makes it out, what? Donglin Han's eyes widened. He leapt to his feet, furious. How can this happen? Yanxue is far too reckless. Immediately lock down the information and prevent it from making it out. I'll go pay a personal visit. Donglin Han was left furious and speechless. Donglin Yanshue's identity completely outshone the past now. Any man, regardless of identity or background, would sully Donglin Yanshue's name if the news that he had entered her room was made public. As Donglin Yanshue's father, Donglin Han could not allow that to happen. Chapter 2485. A secret meeting. Donglin Han immediately rushed through the door furiously. However, as soon as he opened the door, he saw a ruddy old man standing outside with his back towards Donglin Han, staring in Donglin Yanshue's direction. Donglin Han was surprised when he saw the old man. He immediately showed respect and clasped his fist. Greetings, ancestor. The old man was the ancestor of the Donglin clan, Donglin's. Xiao Han, go back to reading your book? You don't need to look into Yanshue's matters. She's no longer young now. She knows what she's doing. Donglin Su waved his hand behind him. But ancestor, Donglin Han still felt that it was inappropriate. With Donglin Yanshue's current status, how could he just let a foreign man enter her room? Enough. I already know about the matter. Go back to reading your book, said Donglin Su. His old eyes were focused in Donglin Yanshue's direction. They flickered with a wise light as his lips gently perked up. Within the sacred hall that shone with dazzling light above the clouds in the Radiant Saint Hall, their leader, Yuchen, stood on the top as he stared at the sea of clouds. Leader, we've just received the news that Protector Donglin Yanxue has personally received an unknown man and let him into her courtyard. At this moment, a black-robed envoy arrived behind Yuchen and said politely. Out of the 6 protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall, only Donglin Yanxue remained outside in the Donglin clan most of the time. As such, to protect her, the Radiant Saint Hall had hid people in both Donglin City and the Donglin clan, constantly watching over her and keeping her safe, preventing any people from scheming against her. After all, they could not afford to lose the Protector Swords. Protecting the Protector Swords became a great priority of the Radiant Saint Hall. As a result, when Jian Chen was personally taken into the Donglin clan by Donglin Yanxue, the people in the Radiant Saint Hall learned of it immediately. An unknown man? A gleam of light flashed through Yu Chen's eyes when he heard that. His brows furrowed in thought. Then he waved his hand and dismissed the envoy. He said gently, Xianzhan, come over. Yu Chen's voice seemed magical, piercing through most of the sacred hall and ringing out in the head of Xian Zhan. Xian Zhan appeared before Yu Chen. He did not bow, walking over with composure. He asked, "What's the matter?" "I've just received the news that Donglin Yanxue has personally received an unknown man in the Donglin clan, directly bringing him to her courtyard. Xian Zhan, what do you think of this matter?" Yu Chen said calmly. "An unknown man?" Xian Zhan was also surprised. He roughly understood Donglin Yanxue, so why would she bring an unknown man back to her residence? After a moment of thought, Xian Zhan said slowly, "I looks like he's probably Jian Chen." Afterwards, he stared at Yu Chen with shining eyes and said, "The method of the exalted saint is still on Jian Chen. Now that he has come to the desolate plain, should we take action and take it back from him? Gong Sunji cares about the method of the exalted saint even more than me. After all, he has already obtained the other portion of the Grand Exalt's legacy. What he lacks is the cultivation method. If he gets the method of the exalted saint, Gong Sunji would have the complete legacy," said Yu Chen. In the current saint's world, no one else apart from Jian Chen knew that the so-called Grand Exalt's cultivation method from the Tower of Radiance was actually a cultivation method for the martial soul lineage. Even if someone else possessed it, they would be unable to practice it unless they were part of the martial soul lineage. Xian Zhan frowned and said sternly, "Gong Sunji is becoming more and more haughty. He has already begun to eye the position of leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. With his personality and his identity as the Grand Exalt's descendant, he'll take the position from you sooner or later. Since getting back the method of the exalted saint will only have it fall into Gong Sunji's hands, I think we should leave the cultivation method with Jian Chen for now. We just can't let the method of the exalted saint end up with Gong Sunji." When he reached there, Xian Zhan suddenly sighed. He became filled with helplessness and bitterness. Moreover, the martial soul lineage is the imperial clan among Radiant Saint Masters, and the Master of the Tower of Radiance is also a successor of the martial soul lineage. If the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance learns that we're turning on the imperial clan, I wonder how he would respond. Sigh. Yu Chen also exhaled softly. When Yu Chao came to the desolate plain to investigate, neither he nor Xian Zhan took action because they were still uncertain about how to treat the martial soul lineage. They had locked down the secret that the martial soul lineage was the imperial clan. They did not reveal it to anyone else. Apart from the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, only the two of them knew. This was because the grievances between the Radiant Saint Hall and marital soul lineage ran too deep. It was to a point where it was impossible for them to reconcile. If the news that the martial soul lineage was the imperial clan made it out, it would definitely lead to a great mess. The entire Radiant Saint Hall might even fall apart because of it. Neither Xian Zhan nor Yu Chen wished to see that happen. Yu Chen's gaze deepened. He said sternly, "There's one more thing. I think you have some doubts about it just like me, and that's Bai Yu and Han Xian. Bai Yu is clearly only a one-star genius. That's extremely ordinary in our Radiant Saint Hall, and Han Xian is similar as well. Why would they obtain protector swords?" Out of the 6 protector swords, all the wielders, apart from Gong Sunji, have a similar point. They all have ties with Jian Chen. Xian Zhan remained silent. He did not say anything. He and Yu Chen had already developed suspicions over the matter. 3 days later, Bai Yu, Han Xian, and Xian Ming, under Donglin Yanxue's lead, arrived discreetly in a luxurious manner within an extremely busy city in the central region. They secretly met up with Jian Chen. They had all disguised themselves and concealed their presences, hiding their identities. They came like ghosts and did not alarm anyone. Second senior. Out of the 3 of them, Bai Yu was the most excited. As soon as she saw Jian Chen, she called out in joy. It was as if Jian Chen would always be her second senior no matter how he seemed to be and no matter his identity. Han Xian and Xian Ming were much more composed. Han Xian smiled at Jian Chen and nodded gently, while Xian Ming's gaze was mixed. "Junior sister, sir, I had no choice but to disguise myself back then. I've caused you trouble these years," Jian Chen said to Han Xian and Bai Yu apologetically. He knew that Bai Yu and Han Exen had a very tough time in the Radiant Saint Hall before they obtained protector swords, so he always felt slightly ashamed. "Brother Xian Ming, please forgive me." Afterwards, Jianchen looked at Xian Ming and clasped his fist. "Sigh. Jianchen, you really hid it well from me. I never, ever thought you would be a part of the martial soul lineage." Xian Ming looked at Jianchen with mixed feelings. There was some unfamiliarity in his gaze towards Jianchen. "Tell me, Jianchen. You've risked your life to come to the desolate plain and gathered us here. What's the important matter?" Xian Ming continued, but his tone was rather cold. Chapter 2486. Vile Human Nature. Jianchen was slightly surprised when he sensed Xian Ming's attitude. He glanced at Xian Ming deeply. The current Xian Ming gave him a feeling rather unfamiliar from the person he remembered. However, he soon thought about how he and Xian Ming were never on particularly close terms. Their friendship was not particularly special. Coupled with the fact that he was a successor of the martial soul lineage and how he was supposed to oppose the Radiant Saint Hall, Xian Ming's attitude did make sense. Jianchen came to a realization. He did not mind Xian Ming's attitude. He slowly glanced past Donglin Yanxue, Bai Yu, Han Exen, and Xian Ming and said solemnly, "In the Radiant Saint Hall, you're the only people that I truly care about. I am unable to change my identity as a member of the martial soul lineage, nor am I able to resolve all the grievances accumulated between the martial soul lineage and Radiant Saint Hall across all the generations. However, I don't want to become your enemies either, so I hope that you can agree to just one request of mine. From today onwards, unless the martial soul lineage actively attacks your Radiant Saint Hall, I hope you don't touch the people of the martial soul lineage. Of course, that's only limited to the four of you because you're the only people I care about. I really don't want us to become enemies. Jianchen, your martial soul lineage is no longer the opponent of our Radiant Saint Hall now. Even if you attack us, your strength won't be of much use at all. You won't be able to change the situation," Xian Ming said indifferently, acting as if Jianchen had almost become a stranger to him. "Xian Ming, are you saying that even if the martial soul lineage avoids your Radiant Saint Hall, you'll still attack them?" Jianchen stared right at Xian Ming and spoke calmly. Even though Xian Ming had obtained a protector sword and possessed great battle prowess now, Jianchen did not fear him. Han Exen, Donglin Yanxue, and Bai Yu all stood to one side quietly. They looked back and forth between Jianchen and Xian Ming. After a while of thought, Xian Ming stared at Jianchen with shining eyes. "Jianchen, seeing how we were once acquainted, I can guarantee you that I won't touch the martial soul lineage as long as they don't actively attack the Radiant Saint Hall if you leave the method of the Exalted Saint behind." "You want the method of the Exalted Saint?" The light in Jianchen's eyes changed. He now stared at Xian Ming like he was looking at a complete stranger. He had never thought Xian Ming would begin to eye the method of the Exalted Saint. Was this still the Xian Ming he once knew? The method of the Exalted Saint is the supreme treasure of our Radiant Saint Hall. It belongs to our Radiant Saint Hall in the first place, Xian Ming said righteously with a sigh. A sliver of desire appeared in his eyes, and he became rather excited as well. He thought, "I already wield a protector sword now. In the current Radiant Saint Hall, no one can do anything to me, including the descendant of the Grand Exalt, Gong Sun Ji. If I get the method of the Exalted Saint, it'll be truly perfect. No one will be able to take it from me." At that moment, a sliver of ambition appeared in his heart. This ambition had never appeared in his head before. As a matter of fact, it was a thought he could not have even imagined in the past because he was only a slightly talented Radiant God King back then. However, it was different now. He was a wielder of a protector sword and was in control of great power. He now had the confidence and courage to attempt matters he did not even dare to think about in the past. "I am unable to take out the method of the Exalted Saint. Xian Ming, you have to think it through. If you actively attack our martial soul lineage, we will no longer be friends but enemies." Jianchen's face sank slightly, and he replied rather coldly. "Jianchen, if you leave behind the method of the Exalted Saint, we will still be friends," Xian Ming said firmly. his intentions were very clear. If Jianchen did not leave behind the method of the exalted saint, they would become enemies. Jianchen stared at Xianming deeply. After a long while, he finally sighed and said, "If that's the case, let's see what happens in the future." Xianming's attitude disappointed Jianchen greatly. At that moment, Jianchen only felt very tired. A deep sense of helplessness filled his heart. He was no longer in the mood to stay any longer. He wanted to leave. However, Xianming did not allow him to leave. With a flash, he arrived at the door and coldly said, "Jianchen, you better leave behind the method of the Grand Exalt. It doesn't belong to you." Jianchen stopped and stared at Xianming sharply. The light in his eyes flickered, causing his gaze to become piercing such that people dared not look into them. He growled and said, "Are you trying to stop me?" At this moment, Jianchen was truly angered. Sword qi seemed to permeate his surroundings. "Xianming, you can't forget that Jianchen once helped you. Don't go overboard." Donglin Yanxue arrived before Jianchen and stared at Xianming with an ugly expression. Her presence surged. "As long as I'm here, your protector sword won't be able to harm Jianchen, Xianming. Senior Xianming, if you plan on laying your hands on second senior brother, I can only work together with Sister Yanxue against you," said Bai Yu as she stood forward as well. "Xianming, your ambitions have run wild. You already wield a protector sword. Don't you know when to stop?" Han Xian also arrived before Jianchen. Now, Donglin Yanxue, Bai Yu, and Han Xian all stood together with Jianchen. As he faced the three of them, Xianming's expression became rather ugly. "Minger, let's go back." At this moment, a heavy voice rang out. Vice Leader Xianzhan suddenly appeared behind Xianming. Xianzhan glanced at Jianchen deeply and said nothing. He did not even look at Donglin Yanxue, Bai Yu, or Han Xian, whose expressions had changed greatly. He grabbed Xianming by the shoulder and vanished, having left. "It's Vice Leader Xianzhan. He has actually come as well." Donglin Yanxue paled in fright as she became badly shaken. In the Radiant Saint Hall, the strongest was no longer the leader Yuchen but Vice Leader Xianzhan. She knew it was extremely clear that if Xianzhan wanted Jianchen to stay, no one present would be able to stop him. Not only was Xianzhan extremely powerful, but he also wielded a protector sword. Even though the protector sword he wielded did not have a high ranking, he was actually able to unleash even greater strength due to his higher level of cultivation. Xianzhan actually did nothing? Han Xian murmured. Xianzhan's behavior dumbfounded him. Did Xianzhan not want the method of the exalted saint back? "Second senior, it's not safe here anymore. You better leave," Bai Yu said in a hurry. She worried for Jianchen's safety very much with Xianzhan's appearance. She was afraid that even more people would find out about his identity. "Jianchen, both Xianming and Xianzhan know that you're here. It's impossible to be certain that they won't leak the news, so you need to leave the desolate plain immediately. Don't worry, Bai Yu and I will always remain the Radiant Saint Hall cultivating. Unless the Master of the Tower of Radiance appears, we won't go out to fight. The leader and vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall can no longer order us around anymore," said Han Xian. Chapter 2487. Xianzhan's stance. Regardless of whether Xianzhan revealed the fact that he was present, Jianchen knew that Xianzhan's appearance alone meant that he could no longer remain on the desolate plain. He said, "Yunxue Bai Yu sir, take care. I must bid you farewell." Afterwards, he looked at Bai Yu and Han Shi with mixed feelings. He said seriously, "Perhaps we really might become enemies in the future, but no matter what happens to us, you will always be my junior sister and teacher in my mind. Farewell." With that, Jianchen left without even looking back. Donglin Yanxue was reluctant for Jianchen to go as she looked at him. She caught up without any hesitation and said, "Just let me send you off one last time. I'll be able to keep Xianming busy if he plans on attacking you. Let's return to Donglin City. There's an interplanar teleportation formation there." Xianming. Jianchen sighed inside when he heard that name again. Although he and Xianming were technically just strangers who had happened to run into each other, they had known each other in the past. He had never thought Xian Ming would actually become like this today. It left Jian Chen incredibly disappointed. However, this was related to a Grand Exalt's cultivation method after all. Let alone him and Xian Ming, even many brothers who had gone through thick and thin together would turn on each other if such a great cultivation method was presented before them. Father, why did you take me away? The Grand Exalt's cultivation method is with Jian Chen. That's the greatest cultivation methods in the world. Obtaining it is basically opening up a path to heaven. Even if we ignore Grand Exalts, peak experts only second to Grand Exalts are figures that can shake up an entire world as well. Xian Ming stared at his father with regret. Currently, they were within the sacred hall above the clouds in the Radiant Saint Hall. Xuang Ming had become a protector of the Radiant Saint Hall. Both his status and strength were completely different from the past. He now stood at the top, where he had the right to fight for things that would benefit him. The Grand Exalt's cultivation method just happened to be something that interested him very much. Xian Zhan stared at the regretful Xian Ming and sighed gently. Ming'er, have you really lost your mind over a single protector sword? You need to understand that the power from the protector sword is from a foreign source in the end. Since the artifact spirit of the Radiant Saint Hall could bestow it upon you, he can also take it away. Once you lose the protector sword, do you think you have the ability to keep the Grand Exalt's cultivation method? With that, Xian Ming immediately calmed down. He also understood that everything he currently possessed came from the protector sword. Since the protector sword has chosen me, it won't leave me that easily. Xian Ming also became slightly afraid. He had grasped this great power, becoming a supreme existence. He could not accept losing this power and getting reduced to a failure. Xian Zhan shook his head. You're wrong. You all think the protector swords chose you, but in reality, it was the artifact spirit, not the protector swords. The artifact spirit has full control over who becomes the master of the protector swords, or it would have been impossible for Bai Yu and Han Xian to obtain swords with their talent, let alone the fact that their protector swords' rankings exceed ours. They're not descendants of the Grand Exalt after all. Xian Zhan had already explained it so clearly, so Xian Ming would be far too dim if he still did not understand. Father, are you saying that it's all because of Jian Chen that we're able to obtain the protector swords? Xian Ming paled in fright. Disbelief filled his face. Xian Zhan did not provide a straightforward answer. He said sternly, the Tower of Radiance has slumbered for so long, yet right after Jian Chen enters it, things happen, awakening the artifact spirit. In the miniature world where Jian Chen and Gongsun Ji competed over the legacy, the gateway suddenly closed after Jian Chen had left as well, trapping all the Radiant God Kings in there. Apart from Gongsun Ji, who's the Grand Exalt's descendant, all the wielders have ties with Jian Chen. Don't you think that's a little too coincidental? With that, Xian Ming sank into his thoughts. The light in his eyes changed as he became both surprised and uncertain. He was extremely shocked inside. Ming'er, it's best if you focus on your cultivation next. You don't have to worry about anything else. Don't think about obtaining the method of the Exalted Saint either. Even if you get your hands on it, you will become mortal enemies with Gongsun Ji. With Gongsun Ji's identity as the Grand Exalt's descendant and the rest of the legacy that he has obtained, he's basically supposed to obtain the cultivation method, Xian Zhan said with mixed feelings. After a long while of hesitation, he still ended up not telling Xian Ming about the martial soul lineage being the imperial clan. He was still not prepared for someone else to learn about this astonishing news, just in case it upheaved the Radiant Saint Hall. Was I wrong? Did my judgment really become clouded by greed? At that moment, Xian Ming could not help but ask himself those questions. Through the interplanar teleportation formation in Donglin City, Jian Chen left the desolate plain successfully. He continued traveling without stopping, taking more teleportation formations to return to the Martial Soul Mountain as soon as possible. He reported everything he had learnt to the other 7 members of the Martia soul lineage. If there are 3 wielders of protector swords who don't target us and only watch over the desolate plain, the pressure we face will be greatly reduced. The other members of the martial soul lineage were relieved after receiving Jian Chen's news. The only problem is Xian Zhan. He was already extremely powerful. Him possessing a protector sword is basically overkill. I need to admit that there's no one in our martial soul lineage who's Xianzhan's opponent anymore, Hunzang said sternly as he frowned heavily. Since we're not his opponent, let's just defend the martial soul mountain with our lives. As long as we remain on the martial soul mountain, even Xianzhan won't be able to break in with his protector sword, said Su Qi. The martial soul mountain was the last line of defense for the martial soul lineage. Unless it was a supreme expert who had reached the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime like the heaven-splitting ancestor, no one could breach the martial soul mountain. I hope our 9th successor appears as soon as possible. Once the 9 successors gather, our martial soul lineage will experience an unprecedented high and be able to stand supreme in the saints' world. Moreover, the archives have clearly recorded that during the age when the 9 successors appeared, our martial soul lineage could even face off against Grand Exalts, Chu Jian said eagerly. The martial soul lineage already had 8 people now. They only needed one more person. Chapter 2488, Subduing the Divine Hall. Jianchen felt extremely curious after hearing Chu Jian's words. Would the restraint preventing the martial soul lineage from reaching Grand Prime be temporarily removed? However, even if the restraint was removed, there would still be a tremendous chasm between them and the supreme level of Grand Exalts. He struggled to understand just how the martial soul lineage would be able to stand up to Grand Exalts once all 9 successors gathered. However, there was one aspect he was basically certain about. It would definitely not depend on personal cultivation. This was because there was a huge chasm between Grand Prime and Grand Exalt. It was impossible for people to break through so easily. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the Saints' world to only possess a handful of Grand Exalts despite all the Grand Primes. It's just a pity that the age when the 9 successors appeared is far too distant from current times. Many of the records and archives have been lost, so we're unable to look into it in great detail. Jianchen felt even more curious about the martial soul lineage. He had realized since a long time again that there was probably a huge story behind the martial soul lineage. It would never be as simple as it seemed on the surface. After all, the martial soul lineage was the only inheritance in the entire Saints' world that had gone on unbroken. And the martial soul mountain came from the previous aeon at the very least. It's impossible to get a clear understanding about just how long it has been around from the history on the martial soul mountain alone, and it's not possible to find out who it came from. Moreover, I feel that it seems to hide even more profound secrets than the Tower of Radiance in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jianchen wondered as he looked at the mountain below him. Very soon, the 8 successors of the martial soul lineage parted. Jianchen also returned to where he spent most of his time cultivating. Along the way, he passed by the Neptunian Divine Palace. He could not help but stop and think about what his 5th senior sister had said. She had told him to go check on Ziyun. He stood before the Neptunian Divine Palace as he stared at the deep blue structure. In the end, he did not approach it. Instead, he turned around and left. He knew Ziyun had developed feelings for him, but he had no interest in this at all. Since he had already explained everything to Ziyun, it would be the best for him to maintain his distance and let time dissolve Ziyun's feelings. Constant contact with her might be detrimental instead. Artifact Spirit, are you going to yield now, or do you choose to continue being stubborn? Jianchen arrived before the Divine Hall from the Gloomwater sect and asked the Artifact Spirit indifferently. He was already prepared to leave the martial soul mountain, but the Divine Hall before him made him feel powerless. If the Artifact Spirit still did not yield and continued to resist, it would be impossible for him to take a grumbling Divine Hall that could shrink and grow whenever with him. He would not even be able to take interplanar teleportation formations. Don't you even think about making me yield, the Artifact Spirit replied stubbornly like before. It looks like I can only continue using you for my experiments with martial soul force, Jianchen said coldly. He sat down before the Divine Hall and used it to familiarize himself with the techniques involving martial soul force. He would not be able to leave the martial soul mountain before he subdued the Divine Hall. After all, The divine hall possessed far too many treasures. It even had hell water, an item that could interest even grand primes. Jian Chen also wanted the hell water because he knew it was a divine item that could refine the soul. It even possessed fragments of ways, making it have wondrous effects. I'll practice the phantasm technique as my third secret technique, thought Jian Chen. The phantasm technique was different from the soul-destroying technique and the heaven-severing technique. If the soul-destroying technique and heaven-severing technique were focused on offense, then the phantasm technique would be for auxiliary purposes. This was a technique to influence the souls of people through martial soul force, directly creating illusions and disorienting their minds. Under the influence of the phantasm technique, people with weaker wills or were far weaker than the caster could even become lost in an illusion for all of eternity. Of course, this was only one of the effects of the phantasm technique. It had another effect, which was puppeting the soul. The so-called puppeting the soul was temporarily gaining control over the target's mind, allowing people to control the target to fulfill their own purposes. Of course, puppeting the soul was very difficult to achieve. It was useless against cultivators of the same level and was only effective against people much weaker. Afterwards, Jian Chen began to practice his phantasm technique on the artifact spirit. He was obviously unable to control the artifact spirit through the technique, but he could subject him to illusions. The artifact spirit of the divine hall was very powerful, but most of this power came from the divine hall. If he could not use the power of the divine hall, he would be extremely frail. As a result, Jian Chen was able to influence the artifact spirit with the phantasm technique. In the next period of time, the artifact spirit would constantly call out strangely, blabbering about nonsense. Under the influence of the phantasm technique, he had fallen into illusions, experiencing matters that only he knew. He would sometimes laugh out loud or cry and sometimes be excited or frightened. His emotions changed frequently, experiencing a multitude of feelings. Master, don't erase me. I've been loyal to you, wholeheartedly serving you. Please, Master, don't erase me. Suddenly, the artifact spirit called out in fright as if it had encountered something extremely terrifying. The light in Jian Chen's eyes flickered from this sight. He was taken by surprise. I never thought this phantasm technique would be so powerful. Even the artifact spirit of a medium-quality god artifact can't resist it. Or maybe artifact spirits of god artifacts are more vulnerable to illusions than cultivators. 5 years later. Artifact spirit, let me ask you again. Are you going to accept me as your master? If you do, all your pain and torture will vanish, but if you don't, there'll only to be a lot more of it. And if you continue being stubborn, I'll directly erase you from existence once my martial soul force becomes powerful enough, Jian Chen called out as he sat before the divine hall. He had already grasped all 3 secret techniques during these 5 years, causing the artifact spirit misery. The artifact spirit had to go through hellish torture daily. Although Jian Chen was unable to harm him with his current strength, the torture and torment was even more difficult to endure than being heavily injured. I yield. I accept you as my master. This time, the artifact spirit finally gave in completely. Good. Jian Chen was overjoyed. He had finally subdued this divine hall after so much difficulty. The following was far simpler. With the artifact spirit's cooperation, Jian Chen refined the medium-quality god artifact successfully. At the same time, he learnt the name of the divine hall, the Water Cloud Hall. Chapter 2489. Bidding farewell to everyone, I can only unleash half of the power of this medium-quality god artifact. It really is a god artifact for chaotic primes. It's impossible to unleash the full power within a medium-quality god artifact without reaching chaotic prime, Jian Chen thought. However, the greatest power of a divine hall was its defense, so he was satisfied even if he could only unleash half of its total power. Moreover, with the artifact spirit's assistance, his control over the Water Cloud Hall would be countless times easier than without an artifact spirit. With a flash, Jian Chen vanished from the martial soul mountain and arrived inside the Water Cloud Hall. As a medium-quality god artifact, The water cloud hall was extremely large inside. It was like a miniature world. However, Jianchen did not care about this. What truly piqued his interest were the cultivation resources and the various treasures the Gloomwater sect had accumulated over the years. He was now the master of the Water Cloud Hall, so he could control a portion of its power. With a thought, he arrived before the treasury in the Water Cloud Hall. The door to the treasury was forged from impressive god-tier materials. At the same time, there were formations engraved on it, making it extremely tough. Even chaotic primes would not be able to open it up easily. "Open!" Jianchen called out, and with a heavy rumble, the door opened slowly. Jianchen entered the treasury eagerly. When he saw the items inside, he could not help but smile. As a peak sect, the Gloomwater sect obviously possessed a great assortment of resources. There were countless pills, heavenly resources, and other divine items inside the treasury. Additionally, there were piles of supreme-grade divine crystals that stood like mountains. They probably numbered in the hundreds of millions. There's actually 1,000,000 colored divine crystals as well. When Jianchen saw the pile of divine crystals that shone with colorful light, his eyes immediately lit up. Although there were a lot of supreme-grade divine crystals, they were only useful to god kings. Basically, all primordial realm experts used colored divine crystals to cultivate. At the same time, colored divine crystals were a form of currency worth far more than supreme-grade divine crystals. It's just a pity that most of these colored divine crystals are one-colored. There are very few 2, 3, and 4-colored divine crystals, and even fewer 5-colored divine crystals. Jianchen felt a slight sense of pity. If the pile of 1,000,000 colored divine crystals were converted to 5-colored divine crystals, there would probably only be 100,000 of them. "Master, this is hell water. The Gloomwater sect can only collect a single droplet every 1,000,000 years. 12 droplets remain right now," the artifact spirit's voice rang out. The space before Jianchen pulsed, and 12 pure white bottles appeared before Jianchen. Jianchen revealed a sliver of desire in his eyes as he looked at the hell water. He had heard about their effects. They were a heavenly resource greatly beneficial to the soul and were even enough to interest grand primes. "Only half my soul remains, and who knows what the effects in the future will be. I hope this hell water can repair my soul," thought Jianchen. He took a bottle of hell water and left the Water Cloud Hall, planning on ingesting it on the Martial Soul Mountain. Even though he had become the master of the Water Cloud Hall, he still felt that he was safer on the Martial Soul Mountain. After all, he had tormented the artifact spirit of the Water Cloud Hall for many years. It would be impossible to ensure that the artifact spirit did not hold grudges towards him. If he suddenly interrupted Jianchen's cultivation, the consequences would be unthinkable. Jianchen opened the jade bottle and studied it carefully. After confirming there was nothing wrong with the hell water, he downed the droplet. The hell water dissolved as soon as it reached his mouth, turning into a ball of white mist that drifted towards Jianchen's soul. Immediately, Jianchen felt his mind shudder. An extremely pleasant feeling appeared in the depths of his soul, making him feel like he was walking on clouds. At the same time, Jianchen could clearly sense his soul become even more consolidated from the presence of the hell water. If his soul had been a gas before, it had begun to condense into a liquid after consuming the hell water. This was a change in quality, an evolution to a higher level. Right now, Jianchen felt like his soul was being reborn, experiencing an extremely great increase. The effects of the hell water did not just end there. It also contained pure fragments of laws, without any particular orientation. They could assist different people in comprehending different laws. The effect was just like when Jianchen had ingested some comprehension tea, except the hell water was clearly on a much higher level than the comprehension tea he drank in the past. There aren't a lot of fragments of laws in the hell water. If I used them to comprehend the laws of the sword, I probably wouldn't make a breakthrough even if there were 100 times the amount. It looks like I can only use them to comprehend the laws of the hallowed. Jianchen immediately concentrated on cultivation, borrowing the fragments in the hell water to comprehend the laws of the hallowed. His cultivation this time lasted for half a month. When he opened his eyes, undisguised joy appeared. A single droplet of hell water has elevated my comprehension from early overgod to mid-overgod. It has saved me several dozen years of cultivation and strengthened my soul, thought Jianchen. Although a single droplet of hell water had not been enough to repair his damaged soul, he was very satisfied by the benefits. Afterwards, Jianchen ingested another droplet of hell water and only roused after cultivating for half a month. However, the effects this time disappointed him slightly. The droplet of hell water only allowed his soul to grow by around 10%, while his laws of the hallowed remained at mid-overgod. The stronger I become, the weaker the effects of the hell water. When my martial soul force was at early overgod, I only needed a single droplet to reach mid-overgod, but I need at least 3 droplets to get to late overgod. If this continues, I'll need 9 droplets at the very least to reach early God King from late overgod. 9 droplets might not even be enough. Jianchen felt that it was a pity. Hell water was indeed something good, but there was just too little of it. It was impossible for him to obtain a large quantity of it. He glanced at the remaining 10 droplets of hell water and did not consume any more. He stowed them away with a wave of his hand before visiting Hun Zong and the others. He began to bid farewell to them. 8th Junior, you're leaving the Martial Soul Mountain? The 7 other successors were all surprised when they heard that Jianchen was about to leave. My clan is on the Cloud Plane, while my wife's on the Skyfire Plane. I've already spent many years away from them, so I miss them very much. As a result, I must go, said Jianchen. If that's the case, we won't be urging you to stay. 8th Junior, be careful outside. Once you encounter an opponent you can't defeat, you must call us immediately, said Hun Zong. Jianchen nodded before planning on giving a droplet of hell water to every single one of them. Hell water isn't very useful on me. It's best if you keep it for yourself, 8th Junior. You need it more. Hun Zong and the others declined his offer. In the end, only Qing Shan took a droplet of hell water, and Jianchen put away the 6 other droplets he offered. 9 droplets of hell water remained from the original 12 now. Chapter 2490, The Skyfire Plane, 8th Junior. This spaceship was forged by your senior sister. Although it's technically only a low-quality god artifact, it has reached the peak of low-quality god artifacts. It might not be a medium-quality god artifact, but it outshines even medium-quality god artifacts in certain aspects of convenience. Jianchen's 5th senior, Su Qi, took out a sliver-white flying shuttle. The shuttle seemed like a diamond, hovering in her hand quietly. It shone with a faint layer of light, giving off the pressure of a god artifact. Since you're leaving the Martial Soul Mountain, you must have a lot of traveling to do. The spaceship I've forged can match chaotic primes. Even some weaker chaotic primes can't catch up to it. Moreover, the spaceship doesn't just possess speed. It has great defense and can pierce through many things. Once it reaches its full speed, it has extremely powerful attacks, and it can even directly pierce through planets, Su Qi continued to explain to Jianchen in detail. Thank you, 5th senior, but it's just far too valuable. Jianchen declined the gift. A spaceship that was extremely close to being a medium-quality god artifact would definitely be worth several times more than regular medium-quality god artifacts. Let alone the difficulty of forging a god artifact like that, the materials for it would be extremely rare as well. As a result, special god artifacts like spaceships were worth several times more than regular god artifacts. 8th Junior, just accept it. Your 5th senior sister has quite some skill in terms of refining artifacts. Refining a low-quality god artifact has become nothing special for her now. Just take the spaceship, said the 4th senior brother, Yun Ziding. 8th Junior, you can't decline gifts from 5th senior sister. She has reached the level of grandmasters in terms of refining artifacts. In reality, basically all of your seniors possess a spaceship refined by your 5th senior. Look, here's mine, said Qing Shan. A spaceship also hovered in Qing Shan's hand. It was also diamond-shaped, but its appearance differed from the one that Su Qi was offering. Qing Shan continued, moreover, the spaceships refined by 5th senior aren't just god artifacts. They also possess the symbol of our martial soul lineage. Although our martial soul lineage isn't a superpower that can deter all forces in the Saints' world, we do have some deterrents. Basically, no regular peak organization dares to actively provoke our martial soul lineage. Apart from the Radiant Saint Hall, we don't have any enemies either. Jian Chen stared at the spaceship in Qing Shan's hand. He could tell with a single glance that Qing Shan's spaceship was a medium-quality god artifact. Jian Chen no longer tried to turn down the offer after seeing that. He accepted the spaceship from Su Qi. He understood that even if he did not use the spaceship himself, he could still give it to the Tianyuan clan in the future. The spaceship was only the size of a hand when shrunken. An artifact spirit had already been born inside. Under the artifact spirit's cooperation, Jian Chen refined the spaceship easily. For hours later, a silver-white light shot off from the martial soul mountain. It vanished into the depths of outer space with a flash. A silver-white, diamond-shaped spaceship just 60 meters in length shot through the icy depths of outer space with extremely terrifying speed. Jian Chen stood with his hands behind his back inside the spaceship. He looked at the star chart in there and murmured, "The spaceship refined by Fifth Senior Sister really is extraordinary. This speed is at least 10 times faster than when I travel alone. Probably even some chaotic primes cannot match this speed. The only problem is that the spaceship is a little small inside." Jian Chen looked behind. The limit of the spaceship was only 60 meters. It could not expand any further. With the spaceship, Jian Chen completed a journey of 3 days in just over 4 hours. He arrived at the interplanar teleportation formation closest to the martial soul mountain. After paying up some 5-colored divine crystals, he left through it. The Taoist sect of divine sound is on the Skyfire Plain. It has already been so many years, so it's time for me to go see Moore. If it's possible, I should probably take her back to the Tianyuan clan, Jian Chen thought. He teleported across several planes consecutively, directly arriving on the Skyfire Plain. In the past, he did not have the strength to fetch Moore, but he was confident he possessed the ability to do so now. After all, basically no one could pose any threat to him now as long as there were no chaotic primes. That included 9th heavenly layer infinite primes. In the past, Jian Chen had used the profound sword chi to kill a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime back at the Gloomwater sect. After cultivating on the martial soul mountain, his strength had increased once again. As a result, only chaotic primes could threaten him now. In terms of cultivation resources, he had obtained the Water Cloud Hall. With the tremendous amount accumulated in there over the years, Jian Chen was confident that the cultivation resources he possessed were no less than the Taoist sect of divine sound. After over a dozen teleportations, Jian Chen finally arrived at his destination, the Skyfire Plain. The interplanar teleportation formation was clearly erected in a city. As soon as he arrived there, he saw the busy square and streets before him. It has been so many years. I've finally set foot on the Skyfire Plain. I wonder how Moore is doing. Jian Chen sighed emotionally inside as he looked at the Skyfire Plain. In the distant past, when Shangguan Moore was taken away from the Cloud Plain by experts of the Taoist sect of divine sound, the Skyfire Plain was a place so distant that he could only imagine it back then. This was because the 5-colored divine crystals needed for a single teleportation was an astronomical figure for him. Back then, he could only swear that he would use his own strength to cross the vast cosmos one day and fetch Shangguan Moore from the Skyfire Plain. Now, he had finally achieved it. At this moment, the teleportation formation that Jian Chen had just used shone with intense light once again, and violent energy surged forth. "Sir, please move to give way to the next people so that you don't interfere with their teleportation." A soldier stationed there arrived before Jian Chen and said to him very politely. None of the people who could travel through these teleportation formations would be simple, so the soldiers did not dare to offend them. At this moment, the teleportation formation flashed, and 5 figures were sent over from another plane, appearing there. Jian Chen could not help but look over. He could tell that the 2 old men in the group of 5 were primordial realm experts, but they were only in early and mid-infinite prime respectively. Out of the 3 remaining people, one of them was a young master with a striking appearance. He seemed rather arrogant. The two others were women who seemed to be attendants. Let's go straight to the Taoist sect of divine sound, the young master said indifferently, but his eyes told a different story. He seemed rather hurried. The two female attendants stood to one side quietly, while the two early infinite prime old men nodded, immediately taking the three of them away. They're also going to the Taoist sect of divine sound? It looks like they're also trying to propose a marriage. The soldier who had spoken to Jian Chen murmured after the five of them had left. The Taoist sect of divine sound? To propose a marriage? Jian Chen heard everything that the soldier had said, which surprised him. He felt rather curious. After all, he was about to visit the Taoist sect of divine sound. He hoped to learn more about any matters that were relevant to the sect. Sir, may I ask which female prodigy these people will be proposing a marriage to when they go to the Taoist sect of divine sound? Jian Chen asked with a clasped fist. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.